You walk into Costco's meat department thinking it's a savings paradise, but pick the wrong package, and your bill can jump by hundreds of dollars while the meal still disappoints. Not every cut of meat at Costco is worth the money, and some of the most eye-catching options are classic spending traps. You'd be awesome if you liked this video. Top meats that are truly worth buying. 1. USDA Prime Beef. If you really want to shop like a pro at Costco, forget those neatly trimmed, good-looking pre-cut steak trays. What's actually worth stopping your cart for are the large, whole cuts of beef sealed tightly in thick vacuum packaging, what experienced shoppers call subprimal cuts. USDA Prime isn't just a fancy label. It's the highest grade of beef, making up only about 2 to 3% of total U.S. beef production, known for its heavy, evenly distributed marbling. That fat is what makes the meat tender, flavorful, and juicy when cooked. Many people freeze when they see a price tag of several $100s on a single piece of meat. But that's sticker shock, not a value problem. Once you bring it home, 20 to 30 minutes with a sharp knife can turn that slab into a dozen thick, restaurant-quality steaks. Vacuum seal them, freeze them, and you've got premium beef ready to use over several weeks. Compared to buying pre-cut steaks or eating out, the cost per meal drops dramatically, with almost no sacrifice in quality. The only trade-off is a bit of upfront effort. For anyone willing to take that step, USDA Prime subprimal beef is easily the biggest win in Costco's entire meat section. 2. Kirkland boneless chicken breasts/thighs. If everyday life doesn't leave you much time for food prep, Kirkland's vacuum-sealed, pre-portioned boneless chicken breasts or thighs are one of the most underrated values at Costco. Unlike oversized chicken trays that require processing at home, these Kirkland packs are divided into multiple individual pouches, usually around 6 sections. Each portion is sized perfectly for a family meal or a few meal prep servings, so you don't have to thaw an entire bulk package and rush to use it. Just take one pouch, and the rest stays sealed, clean, and safely stored. This individual vacuum packaging delivers 2 major benefits. First is freshness. The meat holds its color and smell better in the fridge and is far less likely to suffer freezer burn when frozen. Second is control. You cook exactly what you need, avoiding leftovers that go to waste, a common problem with large bulk chicken packs. While there's a small convenience premium compared to buying one massive tray, the per-pound price of Kirkland chicken is still noticeably lower than buying smaller individual packages at regular grocery stores. 3. Pork tenderloin. Take your eyes off the massive slabs of beef in the cooler for a moment and look down to the shelf nearby. You'll find long, neatly packaged pork tenderloins, one of Costco's most underrated quiet winners. One small but critical note: don't confuse pork tenderloin with pork loin, which is larger and can sometimes turn out dry. What we're talking about here is the tenderloin, the most tender cut of the pig. At Costco, tenderloins are usually sold in twin packs, but each package actually contains 2 separate tenderloins. That means a single purchase gives you 4 full tenderloins in total: bright pink, very little connective tissue, and almost no excess fat. Broken down by price, it often comes out to under $4 per pound, a level that's hard to find at regular grocery stores for the same quality. The biggest strength of pork tenderloin is versatility. You can pan-sear it for a quick 15-minute dinner, roast it whole for a weekend family meal, or slice it thin for stir-fries, sautés, or wraps. Because the meat is naturally tender, there's no need for complicated marinades or prep. A little salt, pepper, and a familiar sauce are more than enough. Thanks to its low fat content and soft texture, pork tenderloin works for almost everyone, from kids to older adults, from people watching their diet to anyone who wants a light but protein-rich meal. 4. Lamb loin chops. Many shoppers walk past Costco's lamb section, assuming it must be expensive. But if you stop and actually look at the price tags, you'll realize this is one of the most luxurious but still affordable items in the meat department, especially lamb loin chops, which look like mini T-bone steaks and are both beautiful and easy to cook. Costco's lamb is primarily sourced from Australia or New Zealand, regions known for high farming standards and consistent flavor. One noticeable difference is the mild, clean aroma, not overpowering, making it approachable even for people who don't usually love lamb. The loin chops are tender, with just enough fat around the edges to keep them juicy without masking their natural sweetness. To put it in perspective, at a restaurant, a plate of lamb chops with just a few pieces can easily cost $40 to $50. At Costco, that same amount of money can buy an entire tray, enough for several family meals. The quality holds up, if not better, and you gain full control over seasoning and doneness. Cooking them is straightforward. Lightly season with salt, pepper, garlic, and a bit of rosemary, then sear over high heat for about 3 to 4 minutes per side. The result is tender, juicy meat with a rich, buttery aroma. No complicated techniques, no heavy sauces, just a restaurant-quality 5-star dinner, right at home. 5. Kirkland Signature Bacon. If there's one item in Costco's meat department that rarely sparks debate, it's Kirkland Signature Bacon. This bacon consistently shows up on lists of America's most loved bacons, not because of heavy marketing, but because the difference is obvious the moment you taste it. What sets Kirkland bacon apart is its well-balanced lean-to-fat ratio. The slices aren't so thin that they shrivel up in the pan, and they're not so thick that they turn chewy. When they hit a hot skillet, the bacon sizzles, the fat renders just enough, and the aroma quickly fills the kitchen. A few minutes later, you're left with strips that are crispy on the outside without being dry, something even many premium brands struggle to get right. Some shoppers hesitate because it's sold in a 4-pack, which can sound like overkill. In practice, that's actually a plus. Kirkland bacon has a long use-by date and keeps well in the fridge for gradual use, and if you're not ready to open it, freezing it barely affects the quality. More importantly, bacon has a way of disappearing much faster than you expect. With consistent pricing and reliable quality, Kirkland Signature Bacon isn't something you buy just to chase a sale. It's one of the few items where buying in bulk still feels like a smart move. Many families start with it just to try, then find themselves back at the meat case a few weeks later, because they've already gone through most of it. 6. Wild-caught sockeye salmon. If you're looking to take a break from red meat and chicken, wild-caught sockeye salmon at Costco is absolutely worth a closer look. Just one glance at its deep reddish-orange color tells you it's different. This is the natural color of salmon that lives in the open ocean, not a hue enhanced through farming. Sockeye is known for its firm texture, rich flavor, and lower fat content compared to other salmon varieties. When cooked, it doesn't fall apart or turn mushy. It holds its structure, making it ideal for people who want fish that actually feels like fish, not just something soft and buttery. At fish markets or upscale grocery stores, sockeye often comes with a high price tag. Costco's buying power makes it far more accessible. One small but extremely effective tip: don't limit yourself to the fresh fish counter. Head straight to the frozen section. Sockeye fillets that are vacuum sealed and flash frozen, right on the boat lock in freshness, sweetness, and texture. In reality, most fresh salmon at supermarkets has already been frozen and thawed. Buying frozen gives you more control and less risk. The biggest convenience is that each fillet is individually packaged. Whether you're cooking a light meal for yourself or feeding the whole family, you can take exactly what you need. The rest stays sealed and protected. No rush, no waste. For anyone trying to eat healthier, boost omega-3 intake, and still keep food spending under control, Costco's wild-caught sockeye salmon is a choice that balances quality with real-world practicality. 7. The $4.99 rotisserie chicken. When it comes to Costco's $4.99 rotisserie chicken, it's hard to even call this shopping in the usual sense. Many people jokingly say they're going to harvest one because the value you get feels far greater than the money you pay. This isn't just a ready-to-eat meal, it's become an icon closely tied to the Costco membership itself. At $4.99, you're getting a fully seasoned, fully cooked rotisserie chicken that typically weighs around 2.9 to 3.1 pounds. The irony is that at many other grocery stores, a raw chicken of the same weight costs more. Costco is willing to sell these chickens at little to no profit because they understand the power of the aroma drifting from the back of the warehouse, and shoppers' tendency to add things while they're already there. But the real value of this chicken isn't just one quick meal. A single rotisserie chicken can be stretched across multiple uses: shredded meat for salads, tacos, sandwiches, or chicken porridge, bones simmered into broth for soup or noodles. With one purchase, you can turn it into several different meals, saving both money and cooking time throughout the week. What keeps Costco's rotisserie chicken popular year after year is its consistency. The meat is tender, not overly dry, and the seasoning is mild enough to be easily adapted. Whether you eat it hot right away or take it home to repurpose, the quality holds up well, something not every rotisserie chicken can claim. Now that you've locked in the best value buys, it's time to keep a clear head and avoid the spending traps. Like the video if this surprised you. Meats you're better off avoiding. 1. Large trays of fresh ground beef. Those oversized trays of fresh ground beef at Costco often feel like a safe buy, driven by a familiar assumption. Buying in bulk must be cheaper. In reality, this is one of the strongest savings illusions in the meat department, and one that ends up costing many families more than they expect. The first issue is pricing. When measured in dollars per pound, Costco's ground beef often isn't significantly cheaper than rotating sale prices at regular grocery stores. The appeal comes from the large tray size, which makes the total price feel reasonable for the amount of meat. But once you break it down per pound, the advantage nearly disappears. The second issue is more dangerous. What happens after you get home? A 5 to 6 pound tray of ground beef forces you to portion it the same day. If you don't, the meat at the bottom quickly darkens, releases moisture, and loses quality. Many people delay portioning or rush through it, leading to poor storage, uneven freezing, freezer burn, dry texture, and loss of flavor. 2. Blade tenderized beef. This is the most dangerous trap in Costco's meat department, and it's also the detail most shoppers never actually read on the label. Pre-cut steaks like ribeye or New York strip look beautiful, tender, and steakhouse ready. But behind that appearance is a process you need to understand before putting them in your cart. To make the meat softer and easier to eat, Costco uses a blade tenderizing process. The beef is run through a machine with hundreds of tiny needles that pierce the muscle fibers. From a texture standpoint, this does make the steak more tender. From a food safety standpoint, it's a very different story. The issue is this. Bacteria like E. coli typically live on the surface of meat. With an intact whole steak, a quick sear is enough. The outside gets hot enough to kill surface bacteria, which is why eating steak medium rare is generally considered safe. But when a steak has been punctured repeatedly, surface bacteria can be pushed deep into the interior. At that point, searing the outside is no longer enough to guarantee safety. The consequence is clear. According to food safety guidelines, blade tenderized beef must be cooked to an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, well done. That means if you prefer your steak medium rare or even medium, you're taking on a health risk that many shoppers don't even realize exists. 3. Pre-marinated/seasoned meats. Don't be fooled by the vibrant colors and strong seasoning aromas in Costco's meat case. Those pre-marinated trays are designed to make you feel like you're saving time and effort. But beneath the glossy sauce is a real cost that's much higher than it appears. First, face the reality. You're not just buying meat. The price per pound includes added water, salt, sugar, cheap oils, and industrial seasonings that have been injected or absorbed. The tray looks heavy and worth the money, but the actual protein content is far lower than you think. Next comes the issue of masking quality. Truly fresh, high-quality meat rarely needs a thick marinade to look appealing. Heavy seasoning is often used to soften texture, intensify aroma, and hide inconsistencies, especially in batches approaching their sell-by date. Once the meat is coated in sauce, you can no longer clearly see its true color or accurately judge freshness. From a health perspective, this is a sodium bomb. Pre-marinated meats often contain extremely high salt levels. A single serving can account for a large portion of the recommended daily sodium intake. You think you're eating meat, but you're actually consuming a lot of added salt and additives along with it. 4. Choice-grade filet mignon. Not everything placed in a premium position is worth a premium price. Choice-grade filet mignon at Costco is a textbook example of a product priced on reputation rather than real eating value. Filet mignon is praised for its tenderness, but that's also its biggest limitation. This cut has almost no fat and very little marbling, which is what creates flavor in a steak. At the choice grade, the already limited fat content is even lower. The result is meat that's undeniably tender but mild, lean, and lacking richness, unless you rely heavily on butter, sauces, or advanced cooking techniques to compensate. The next issue is value. Filet mignon consistently sits among the highest dollar per pound beef cuts, even though each piece is small and lightweight. You're paying for the luxury label, not for a proportionate eating experience. With the same budget, a USDA prime ribeye or New York strip delivers far more flavor, richness, and overall satisfaction. On top of that, choice-grade filet mignon dries out extremely easily. Just a few extra seconds of cooking can cause it to lose moisture immediately, since there's no fat to protect it. For home cooks, this makes it one of the hardest steaks to time correctly. 5. Preformed burger patties. Those trays of preformed burger patties at Costco look like a lifesaver for backyard BBQs, perfectly round, uniform, and ready to go straight on the grill. But behind that convenience is a truth many people don't want to face. You're paying more to eat worse. The first problem is texture. When ground beef is pressed into pre-shaped patties, the meat fibers get tightly compacted. As a result, the burgers release a lot of liquid on the grill, shrink more, and turn dense and chewy, lacking the airy, juicy bite you want. A loosely hand-formed patty made at home almost always tastes noticeably softer and juicier. Next comes the pricing issue. Preformed burger patties always cost more per pound than regular ground beef. That extra money doesn't buy better meat. It pays for the shaping process. You're spending more for a few seconds of machine work, while the eating quality actually goes down. On top of that, flexibility is nearly zero. You can't adjust the fat-to-lean ratio, add onions or seasoning, or change patty size to suit your family's taste. Everything is already locked in at the factory. 6. Raw organic whole chicken. When shoppers see raw organic whole chickens at Costco, many assume this is the safest choice for their family. But once you set the organic label aside and do the real math, this turns out to be one of the least efficient buys in the entire meat department. The first issue is value per pound. Raw organic chicken is priced noticeably higher per pound than conventional chicken. And in return, you still have to do everything yourself: cleaning, prep, seasoning, cooking, and cleanup. When you compare directly, the same money could buy $2 to $4.99 rotisserie chickens, fully cooked, ready to eat, and usable across multiple meals. There's also the risk factor. Raw chicken always carries a higher food safety risk. You have to manage storage carefully and avoid cross-contamination in the kitchen. Costco's rotisserie chicken, by contrast, is fully cooked and heat processed, eliminating most of that risk. The real value of buying meat at Costco doesn't come from labels, oversized trays, or the feeling that buying in bulk means saving. It comes from knowing exactly whether you're paying for meat or paying for convenience, pre-processing, and reputation. The rule of survival is simple. Don't pay extra for pre-made shortcuts that stop you from thinking. At Costco, buying smart saves money. Buying out of habit means losing at the meat counter before you even get home. Which type of meat in the video surprised you the most? Avoiding Costco's rare prime beef trays to pick cheaper options? You're throwing money out the window and missing out on premium clean protein for your bones and joints. Watch this before pushing your cart into the meat section to avoid regret. You'd be awesome if you subscribe and like this video. 1. Prime beef. Many people push their carts right past the trays stamped with USDA Prime because they see the price is a few dollars higher per pound than the choice line, and then tell themselves they should just buy the regular kind to play it safe. That exact mindset causes quite a few families to miss out on one of the biggest steals in the entire fresh meat department. The prime grade only accounts for about 2% of the total beef graded across the United States, featuring marbling spread evenly throughout the muscle fibers, which creates a tenderness and juiciness that choice beef can hardly catch up to when hitting the pan or the grill. The problem lies in the fact that the majority of us only look at the numbers on the price tag and forget to place it side by side with other options. For the exact same ribeye or New York strip steak, graded as prime, boutique butcher shops usually demand a price 30 to 50% higher, simply because they do not have the giant purchasing scale to bargain like wholesale clubs do. And if you compare it to a steak dinner out at a restaurant, a single prime portion there is rarely under $60 or $70, not to mention tax and tip, whereas a meat tray here is plenty to feed the whole family a delicious meal for just a fraction of the cost. A quick tip when picking a prime tray is to look closely at the thickness of the outer fat cap, instead of only focusing on the inner marbling, because an excessively thick fat rim is sometimes a sign of a less valuable cut, even if it is stamped prime. Buying in bulk is totally fine. You can completely portion it out and freeze it right at home, as the natural moisture within prime beef fibers helps it retain its texture significantly better upon thawing compared to choice. For seniors, choosing the right cut of meat is even more crucial than saving a few bucks, because the heme iron in high-quality beef is the type of iron easiest for the body to absorb, something many people suffer a silent deficiency in without even realizing it. Before stepping forward, ask yourself when the last time you looked closely at the seafood price tag was, because the upcoming section might make you completely change that habit. 2. Wild-caught sockeye salmon. The boundary between wild-caught and farm-raised seafood here is clearer than ever. When standing in front of the refrigerated case, your choice does not just dictate the flavor of your dinner, but it is also how you protect your body from industrial additives. Standing in front of the fish display, most shoppers will choose whichever piece looks plump, bright orange, and is $1 cheaper per pound. That sounds reasonable, but it is actually a decision that makes you pay good money for something you do not want to bring home at all. Farm-raised salmon live in cramped cages with minimal movement, so they accumulate dense lines of white fat that are high in omega-6, a type of fat that promotes inflammatory responses, which offers no benefit to anyone worrying about their knees or blood vessels. Its eye-catching orange hue mostly comes from coloring agents mixed into industrial feed, making your liver work much harder to flush it out. Wild-caught sockeye salmon, with its signature deep red hue, is priced at around $14.99 per pound. It is a bit higher indeed, but in return you get an exceptional amount of omega-3, a type of fat that acts like a lubricant for your vascular system, helping reduce arterial stiffness and manage blood lipids. This is also a nutrient that feeds brain cells for those who have passed middle age, slowing down memory decline while soothing the chronic joint pain that quietly flares up whenever the weather turns cold. One thing few people notice is that wild sockeye typically features a firmer texture and contains less fat than farmed fish, meaning it only needs a shorter cooking time to avoid drying out. If you are used to cooking farmed fish in the past, shave off a minute or two when searing or grilling, so the piece of fish still holds its natural moisture inside. A $1 difference per pound sounds small, but when traded for that many health benefits, it is clearly a no-brainer. 3. A5 Wagyu. Not everything that is expensive is worth every penny, and the A5 Wagyu beef tray, imported from Japan, is the clearest example. With an intricate web of marbling that accounts for up to 70% of the meat's weight, the price tag reaching up to $271 makes many people pick it up out of curiosity, only to put it right back down. While it looks luxurious, this is not a dish meant for the daily meals of an average family. On culinary forums, quite a few people who bought it home only realized the truth after the fact. The excessively fatty structure of A5 Wagyu only truly unlocks its potential when thinly sliced for yakiniku-style grilling or dipped for shabu-shabu. If you pan-sear it as a whole cut like a regular steak, the greasy fat will completely overpower the beef flavor. Not to mention, it poses a heavy burden on the cholesterol levels of those who have passed middle age. If you still want to experience it just to know what it is like, a wiser approach is to buy the smallest available cut, slice it very thinly, and use it as a complementary accent in the meal instead of making it the main course. This is just enough to perceive the signature flavor without putting pressure on either your wallet or your health. 4. Grass-fed ground beef. If Wagyu is a high-priced trap, then grass-fed ground beef sits at the opposite end of the spectrum. Cheap, yet with quality that is not inferior at all. Priced at around $6.49 per pound, this is an economical choice for daily meals, even though the supply is often localized by region, meaning not every warehouse has it available at the fresh counter. If you drop by and do not see it, do not give up too quickly. Walk straight to the freezer section, where packages of 100% grass-fed beef burger patties are readily available with an 80-20 lean-to-fat ratio, priced just a tiny bit higher at $6.55 per pound. This fully grass-fed beef contains an omega-3 content 2 to 3 times higher than beef fattened on industrial grain, while also being rich in CLA, a type of fat that is good for cardiovascular health, fitting perfectly into the menu of people over 40. For large families, this is also an ideal choice to prep frozen meatballs or burgers for the entire week, which both saves kitchen time and guarantees a clean source of protein without you having to worry every time you go grocery shopping. The matter is simply shifting from the refrigerated counter to the frozen aisle, taking a few extra steps. But in return, you get a significantly cleaner protein source at the same affordable price. There is a type of food that looks very harmless, and the price is so cheap that many people buy it repeatedly without ever knowing they are personally introducing inflammation into their bodies. 5. Tilapia. Once considered a safe, easy-to-eat seafood choice with minimal fishy odor, farm-raised tilapia is silently shattering that image. This fish is likened to a garbage filter of commercial ponds because the majority of them are fed cheap byproducts to grow as fast as possible in the shortest amount of time. Its nutritional profile is virtually empty of omega-3, but extremely excessive in omega-6. This imbalance is no small matter because it directly triggers and exacerbates inflammatory responses in the body. Anyone over the age of 50 who still eats tilapia regularly will unintentionally push their cardiovascular risks higher, cause asthma attacks to flare up more easily, and make knee joints that are already prone to aching feel even more uncomfortable. If you still want to eat white fish that has few bones and is easy to prepare for the whole family, many nutritionists suggest switching to wild-caught cod or halibut, varieties that still retain that familiar mild flavor but do not carry the burden of inflammation like farm-raised tilapia. If this fish is still sitting inside your grocery cart, this is probably the time to reconsider a shopping habit you have been familiar with for so long. There is a little tip that seafood connoisseurs never speak aloud, and it lies right within the area you usually glide past the fastest. 6. Frozen Argentine red shrimp. The common habit for many people is to head straight to the fresh shrimp counter. But few know that the majority of the shrimp displayed there is actually frozen inventory thawed before hitting the shelves, and most of it comes from overseas indoor farm enclosures. If you want truly delicious shrimp, the wiser direction lies in the freezer section, not the brightly lit refrigerated counter up front. Right there, bags of wild-caught red shrimp from the waters of Argentina or the Gulf of Mexico are priced at only around $9.95 per pound. An unbelievable price for wild-caught items. The shrimp meat is sweet and genuinely crisp and chewy, without absorbing residual substances from cramped farming environments. The natural red hue of this type of shrimp also contains astaxanthin, one of the most potent antioxidants found in nature, which helps protect the retina of the eyes from the effects of aging and keeps the skin more elastic from within. While industrially farm-raised shrimp often live in stagnant water environments prone to the overuse of antibiotics, for less than $10 a pound, you can completely fuel your body with a clean protein source without trading off the health of your immune system, which already begins to weaken with age. A minor note when buying frozen shrimp is that you should thaw it naturally in the refrigerator overnight instead of soaking it in hot water, as rapid thawing easily destroys the natural crispness that is the biggest selling point of this shrimp. 7. Kirkland Organic Pork Tenderloin. Pork is often brushed aside in the menus of seniors, partly because everyone is wary of its reputation for bad fat, fearing that eating it will add a burden to their cardiovascular system. However, the organic pork tenderloin packed in pairs is a completely different story, standing almost in total opposition to that prejudice. This is the leanest and most tender cut on the entire pig. Because the meat fibers are short, it still retains its natural tenderness when cooked, instead of being tough like many other commonly seen cuts. At premium food chains like Whole Foods or specialized butcher shops, organic pork tenderloins typically fluctuate from $9.99 to $12.99 per pound. Thanks to bulk packaging, the price here is 30 to 40% lower. A difference that is by no means small when calculated over an entire year of family shopping. Nutritionally, the leanness of this cut is equivalent to young chicken breast, yet it is much easier to chew and digest, making it highly suitable for those who are starting to feel their digestive systems are no longer as sharp as before. Most notable is the abundant thiamine, or vitamin B1, content inside this clean, grain-fed meat. This is a micronutrient that holds a core role in energy metabolism and maintaining nerve function, something that, when deficient over a long period, easily causes a numbing sensation in the extremities, a symptom quite a few seniors have experienced without knowing the root cause. When preparing it, you only need to sear it quickly for a few minutes on each side, and then let the meat rest before slicing. Avoid overcooking, because this tenderloin has very little fat, making it highly prone to drying out if left over high heat for too long. A twin pack of tenderloin is usually plenty for a dinner of 4, and it is easy to store in the freezer if you don't use it all right away. There is a dish that almost every household buys regularly every single week. The aroma wafting out is something nobody can resist. But the upcoming section will make you look at it through completely different eyes. 8. Whole rotisserie chicken. The fixed $4.99 price tag of a piping hot rotisserie chicken has drawn millions of people to this section every single week for many consecutive years. Fragrant, convenient, and cheap, there is hardly any reason to say no. However, standing from a health perspective, this is a loss leader product designed to retain customers, and that drags along a consequence few people think about. The input quality from high-density industrial factory farms cannot be at the stellar level one would expect. To keep the meat consistently tender and juicy, under heat lamps for many hours, the manufacturer must inject a fairly large amount of saline solution deep inside the meat fibers. With just a small 3-ounce serving, the sodium content already exceeds 460 milligrams. For anyone who has to manage blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, or water retention in the body, eating this dish regularly is practically like silently putting pressure on the vascular system once a week. The greasy, highly seasoned skin is exactly where the most calories and saturated fat concentrate, easily pushing bad cholesterol levels high if eaten without portion control. Furthermore, to keep the meat juicy despite sitting on the shelf for a long time, the manufacturer also adds modified starch, sugar, and especially carrageenan, a thickener with the capability to cause irritation and intestinal inflammation. The dish that seems the most harmless in the entire food department turns out to require much more careful consideration than what its appearance shows. Do not be quick to feel sad if you are a fan of this item, because right after this is a path out that is both delicious and clean, which very few people know to look for. 9. Alternative paleo sausage. If you still want a quick and neat meal for busy days but do not want to compromise your health, the smart direction is to skip the rotisserie chicken section and turn to the nearby freezer section. Right here, there are lines of 100% grass-fed beef sausages or paleo-compliant organic chicken sausages with an ingredient list that is surprisingly clean compared to what we usually see on regular sausage shelves. No nitrate preservatives, no artificial sugars, and no modified starch. Simply clean meat, along with a few natural herbs like garlic, pepper, or dried cilantro. Compared to conventional industrial sausages, which usually contain nitrates and nitrites to maintain an eye-catching pink color, this is the biggest point of difference. This is because those compounds, once inside the body, can convert into nitrosamines, a substance that multiple nutritional studies have questioned regarding its link to certain intestinal pathologies. A few minutes in the air fryer is all it takes to instantly have a quick, neat, and fully nutritious meal without having to worry about hidden salt or additives like the rotisserie chicken just mentioned. For families with elderly members who need to control their daily sodium intake, this is an option that helps the meal retain its inherent convenience without trading off long-term peace of mind regarding health. A little companion tip when buying is that you should read the label carefully right at the shelf. Even though they are all called paleo, not every brand completely eliminates sugar and artificial sweeteners. Sometimes just a few seconds glancing over the ingredient list is enough to avoid buying the wrong one. If you have the time, try pairing this type of sausage with roasted vegetables to have a dinner that is both quick and significantly more balanced in nutrition than just eating it with regular white bread. 10. Australian grass-fed lamb. Quite a few people glide past the lamb section because they think the price is definitely expensive, or the preparation is complicated, fearing the distinct gamey odor that not everyone is accustomed to. That mindset causes many families to miss out on one of the biggest steals that few people notice. Lamb chops from naturally pasture-raised lamb at premium organic supermarket chains typically cost anywhere from $25 to $32 per pound, whereas here they are only around $17. The lamb loin, likened to miniature filet mignon cuts, is even cheaper at just $8.49 per pound. In terms of flavor, naturally pasture-raised lamb usually carries a significantly milder taste compared to industrially fattened lamb, because the distinct gamey odor mostly stems from a grain-based diet and restricted movement in pens. If you have tried lamb before and disliked it, it is highly possible it was simply because you hadn't encountered the right kind raised the proper way. Because it is pasture-raised on natural grasslands rather than undergoing fattening via industrial grain, this product is completely free of residual growth hormones, something that can cause endocrine disruption if accumulated over the long term in middle-aged bodies. This is also a substantial source of zinc and iron, along with an abundant amount of vitamin B12, which is the key to maintaining a healthy nervous system and supporting bone cell metabolism, contributing to the prevention of osteoporosis as age advances. With a price point significantly lower than specialized butcher shops, this is clearly an item worth trying at least once a week instead of staying forever loyal to a few familiar types of meat. Simply marinating it with rosemary, garlic, and a splash of olive oil before grilling is plenty to highlight the natural flavor without requiring any further fuss. One final item that many people still misunderstand as lacking in nutrition, while the truth is completely the opposite. 11. Organic ground turkey. Priced at $6.66 per pound, this organic ground turkey tray is a value-packed choice for anyone looking for a lean protein source without wanting to be overly complicated in preparation. The most valuable aspect does not lie in the price, but rather in a purity rarely seen on the market today. Something that many people who have bought ground meat for years have never looked closely at. Reading the ingredient labels of many conventional brands sold out there carefully, you will easily spot the phrase, natural flavors. A clever way to conceal artificial flavor enhancers that few people notice. This phrase may sound harmless, and even evoke a sense of safety, but it is actually a legal term that allows manufacturers to avoid listing the detailed chemical compounds used to create flavor. The organic product here is completely free of that phrase, delivering a lean and clean protein source for familiar patties or meatballs in family meals. For seniors who already face difficulties consuming high-fat red meats due to a decline in digestive enzymes over time, organic ground turkey provides an extremely lean yet highly digestible source of protein, putting no pressure on the stomach or causing a bloated feeling after meals. Compared to ground beef, ground turkey features a significantly lower saturated fat content, making it more suitable for those who routinely monitor their cholesterol numbers. This is also a versatile option that can be used to replace ground beef in almost all familiar dishes like bolognese sauce, meatballs, or burger patties without needing to change your existing cooking recipes. A simple way to refresh the weekly menu while still maintaining familiar convenience. Shopping at wholesale clubs does not mean compromising with industrial food. Prioritize Australian grass-fed lamb and USDA prime beef trays to pamper your health in your golden years while still keeping your wallet full. Have you chosen which type of meat for this week's menu yet? Leave a comment and share your experience with everyone. Many plump steaks displayed for sale at Costco are not whole-cut meats as they appear to the eye, but are actually pressed together from the meat scraps of multiple different cows using a type of industrial meat glue. And that is just one of the 10 meat items you should stay away from today. You'd be awesome if you subscribe and like this video. Top 10 meats to avoid. 10. Kirkland Signature Organic Chicken Breasts. The organic label stamped on the packaging of Kirkland chicken breasts makes many people willing to pay nearly double the price of conventional chicken because everyone automatically assumes in their head that organic translates to free-range chickens running around freely outdoors. The reality is quite different. Costco only meets the bare minimum of the USDA technical standards to obtain the certification. The chickens are still raised in large-scale, enclosed industrial factory farms, with the only difference being that they are fed organic grain. A few people have tried cooking two packages side by side at home to compare, and the result is almost always the same. In a blind taste test, no one can tell which piece is the more expensive one. In other words, the 100% price premium you pay does not translate into a tastier or healthier meal. It literally just buys you a feed certification label slapped on the outside of the packaging. If you truly want to eat cleaner, you should look specifically for the pasture-raised label instead of stopping at organic. Some people who used to work in the food supply chain have also admitted on anonymous forums that the raising and slaughtering processes between the two chicken lines are virtually identical, with the label on the packaging being the only thing that sets them apart. That price difference should instead be put toward true pasture-raised chicken if your actual goal is to eat cleaner. If you often buy frozen items because you trust the word natural on the packaging, the next item will definitely make you look closely at the product label before dropping it into your cart. 9. Orca Bay Keta Salmon. The words wild caught printed prominently on the bag of Orca Bay frozen salmon play right into the consumer preference for natural food. But in the seafood industry, Keta is the lowest grade in the Pacific salmon family. According to data from NOAA, Keta contains only about 4 to 5% fat by weight, whereas this figure in king or sockeye salmon reaches up to 11 to 15%. Complaints about this cheap frozen salmon pop up heavily on cooking forums every summer, with most describing a shared experience. The meat toughens up the moment it hits the pan. The lack of omega-3 fat marbling means that just a few seconds over high heat causes the muscle fibers to immediately separate, turning what was expected to be a rich salmon dinner into something bland, fibrous, and dry. No different from overcooked chicken breast, when this fish, by nature, is only suitable for making salmon flakes or canning. If you want truly rich salmon without the price skyrocketing too high, sockeye remains a much better option to consider. Carefully checking the fine print on the packaging before buying is also the fastest way to avoid confusing salmon grades that have vastly different nutritional values, since the outside of the bag usually only highlights the words wild caught, without clarifying that this is the lowest grade in the Pacific salmon family. This is also why many home chefs advise each other to read the small print underneath before buying any bag of frozen salmon at Costco. 8. Boneless pork shoulder. Pork shoulder is inherently an affordable cut of meat, born to be used for slow cooking methods like smoking or oven braising, and the bone inside plays the role of a natural heat conductor, helping to retain the connective tissues that create juiciness for the meat fibers. Costco removes the bone beforehand to create a sense of convenience and then pushes the price up to $4 to $5 per pound, which is significantly higher than the naturally very cheap price point of this cut. On community forums, quite a few people have posted pictures of their meat being dry on the edges even after 8 hours of smoking, despite monitoring the temperature very carefully. Losing the bone is essentially losing the natural moisture retention mechanism throughout the long cooking process. So what you bring home is usually a dried-out piece of meat, losing the exact qualities that a pork shoulder is supposed to have. BBQ experts in the US still view this as a rookie mistake, paying more money only to receive a dried-out piece of meat that has lost its original texture. If the warehouse near your house still sells the bone-in version, that is always a more worthwhile option. In the long run, the habit of choosing the bone-in cut also helps save significantly for large family gatherings on weekends, as the price per pound of the bone-in version is typically much lower than that of the pre-processed boneless version. Just adding a few minutes to debone the meat after it is fully cooked makes the effort completely worth it compared to the savings received. 7. Pre-cut filet mignon. With a price tag approaching the $20 per pound threshold, the pre-cut filet mignon trays sitting under the lights of the refrigerated display case still look eye-catching and bright red. However, this muscle group experiences very little movement and has almost no fat, making it extremely sensitive to oxidation the moment it is cut apart and exposed continuously under display lights. Looking down at the bottom of the tray, you will clearly see a layer of dark red liquid pooling. This is actually the nutrient-rich myoglobin that has leaked out before the meat even hits the pan. That lost meat juice carries away both the natural sweetness and the signature tenderness of the filet, meaning you are paying a 5-star restaurant price for a product whose quality has deteriorated right from the display stage, even before you touch any kitchen appliances. Buying the whole subprimal loin and asking the staff to cut it on the spot remains a much better way to preserve quality. Many reviews on Costco's product page also repeatedly mention the exact same detail. After being cooked, the meat shrinks visibly compared to its original size, and quite a few people have even weighed it before and after searing to confirm this weight loss. The next item costs only a few dollars a pound, but it involves a phenomenon in the livestock industry that not everyone knows exists right inside their own freezer. 6. Kirkland's signature chicken thighs. Chicken thighs have long been considered the hardest piece of meat to mess up, due to their fairly high natural fat content. But Kirkland's packaged chicken thigh line has recently faced continuous negative feedback on culinary forums, despite costing only $3.49 per pound. The cause lies in the excessively fast growth rate of commercial factory-farmed chickens, which causes the muscle fibers to develop too quickly, creating woody breast syndrome, also known as woody meat. In major cooking groups in the US, quite a few people have posted photos of the meat after cooking, showing that it still retains hard white stripes running along the grain. The exact signature sign that the poultry industry warned about years ago. The fibrotic connective tissue turns the meat into a chewy, rubbery texture. No matter how long you stew or simmer it thoroughly, it is difficult for seasonings to penetrate deep inside, while the multi-layer packaging is frequently reported to leak meat juice out during transport. Observing the white stripes along the meat fibers carefully through the plastic wrap before buying will help avoid most of this risk. Another small tip is to prioritize buying at the beginning of the week, the time when new shipments have typically just been received, so the chance of encountering woody meat is significantly lower compared to the weekend when the inventory has gone through multiple rounds of sorting. 5. Multi-pack St. Louis-style pork ribs. St. Louis-style pork ribs at Costco are usually packaged in a multi-pack, with 3 to 4 racks wrapped together in a thick layer of plastic wrap. And this is exactly where many butchering flaws are hidden deep underneath. Buyers can only see the rack sitting on the very top when standing in front of the display cooler, while as for the racks underneath, they have to wait until they get home and rip open the plastic wrap to see what they actually look like. Quite a few long-time customers have reported on BBQ forums that the lower racks are often over-trimmed, leaving them bone-heavy and meat-light, or severely uneven in thickness compared to the top rack. This discrepancy in thickness turns timing your grilling or smoking into an absolute gamble. The thick piece remains raw inside, while the thin piece has burned to a crisp before you even notice. If you still want to buy them at Costco, you should choose the tray options where you can clearly see each individual rack instead of the multi-layer sealed packages. Another way is to ask the meat counter staff directly if they sell single racks, because many warehouses still keep a few separated trays for customers who do not want to risk it with the sealed packs. The thickness variation between the racks also leads to consequences in flavor. The thin rib section easily loses moisture and becomes significantly drier when undergoing the exact same smoking duration as the thick rack next to it, causing the entire batch of barbecue to lose the uniformity that a good slab of ribs is supposed to have. 4. Pre-marinated meats. Trays of pre-marinated buffalo chicken wings or Korean short ribs look eye-catching with a glossy, evenly coated layer of sauce, which is enough to make busy people immediately think of an effortless dinner where they just have to put it in the oven and be done. However, in the food processing industry, heavy seasoning with lots of salt, sugar, and flavor enhancers is the most effective way to mask meat cuts that are nearing their expiration date or have discolored and are no longer beautiful enough to be displayed in their original form. The sodium levels in these products usually far exceed the daily recommended limits set by the CDC, which is not good for individuals needing to manage blood pressure or cardiovascular health. Meanwhile, the high sugar content in pre-packaged sauces easily burns when exposed to high temperatures, generating compounds that are harmful to your health. All things considered, you are paying meat rate prices for the entire weight of the sauce coated on the outside, rather than purely for the meat inside the tray. Buying fresh, unseasoned meat and mixing your own marinade at home still allows for much better quality control. In diet and blood pressure management groups, quite a few people have shared stories of accidentally consuming double their recommended sodium intake in a single meal just by trusting the serving size listed on the label, when in reality, the thick sauce clinging around the meat caused the actual salt intake to be much higher than the figure disclosed on the packaging. The next item is one of the best-selling products at the meat counter, but it is also the very item that has appeared multiple times on national food safety warning lists. 3. Kirkland's signature 80/20 ground beef. Small butcher shops often grind fresh beef continuously throughout the day from high-quality leftover meat scraps, but the 80/20 ground beef trays carrying the Kirkland label come from a completely different process, pre-packaged at a centralized industrial processing plant and then sitting in the display cooler for multiple days before reaching the buyer's hands. This product line has appeared multiple times on the USDA recall list due to connections with E. coli bacteria, and the industrial grinding mechanism makes the issue much more severe than manual grinding. Just one piece of contaminated meat on the surface is enough to spread evenly into tons of other meat within the same grind batch. At $4.59 per pound, this product is actually not any cheaper than choosing a fresh piece of chuck roast at the meat counter and asking the Costco staff to grind it directly on the spot, which is completely free and significantly safer. Some former meat department employees have shared on professional forums that the amount of time an industrially ground meat tray sits in the distribution chain before hitting the shelves can last many more days than consumers typically think. Long enough for bacteria to multiply if the storage temperature is not strictly maintained throughout the transport journey. Personally, selecting a whole primal cut of meat and witnessing the grinding process right before your eyes remains the best way to control risk without costing an extra dime. 2. Mechanical, blade-tenderized choice steaks. To make choice-grade cuts like ribeye or New York strip as tender as the expensive prime grade, Costco runs the meat through a machine system that punctures it with thousands of tiny blades before packaging, a technique the meat industry calls blade tenderizing. The CDC has pointed out that mechanically tenderized beef of this type is the cause of multiple severe E. coli outbreaks in the U.S., because the blade puncturing process accidentally pushes bacteria, which inherently only live on the surface of the meat cut, deep into the very center. That is why the USDA recommends that this type of meat must be cooked to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, which is medium doneness or higher. For a steak connoisseur, having to cook a premium piece of ribeye to a high doneness simply due to bacterial concerns is truly an unfortunate trade-off, as the meat becomes visibly tougher compared to when it is enjoyed at a medium-rare level. The most foolproof way is to ask the meat counter staff directly whether the steak has been blade tenderized before buying. Many American culinary forums have had lengthy threads analyzing why steaks bought at Costco cannot achieve the perfect rare or medium-rare doneness like at a steakhouse. And the answer mostly traces back to this exact blade tenderizing technique, something that many diners have no idea exists on the meat they just purchased. There is a truth about the way certain types of meat are shaped that, once you know it, will make it hard for you to look at a meat tray the same way again. On restructured, ready-to-cook steaks, those perfectly round, evenly shaped steak trays with shockingly low prices at Costco are not whole-cut pieces of meat as they appear to the eye, but are actually the product of restructuring technology. This process gathers meat scraps and connective tissues from multiple different cows, then uses transglutaminase, what people in the industry straight up call meat glue, combined with high-pressure press machines to compress them into the shape of a steak. Bacteria from multiple different sources of meat scraps are mixed right inside the compressed meat block, similar to the risk mechanism of industrially ground beef, making it mandatory to cook it completely through to be safe. The loose texture causes the meat to release a lot of water and shrink significantly once it hits the grill grate, potentially losing up to 30% of its original size, while the remaining meat becomes tough and completely loses the natural sweetness inherent to real beef. Stopping by the fresh daily ground beef counter at Costco to hand-shape your own patties remains a much more trustworthy option than buying pre-pressed items. On the nutrition label, products of this type are usually listed as formed or chopped and formed instead of solid muscle. A small detail, but enough to distinguish them from whole-cut meat if the buyer takes the time to read carefully before adding it to the cart, instead of just looking at the eye-catching, perfectly round shape outside the plastic wrap. After a series of warnings that make your shopping cart noticeably lighter, it's time to make up for it with 3 names fully deserving of a spot in your refrigerator: truly delicious, reasonably priced, and completely free of any gimmicks. Top 3 Best Buys. Boneless leg of lamb. The majority of lamb sold in the U.S. comes from Australia or New Zealand, where sheep are raised on natural pastures and slaughtered under strictly controlled ages, resulting in meat fibers that are sweet and have significantly less gamey odor than factory-farmed lamb. However, the boneless leg of lamb primal cut at Costco is often overlooked, mostly because many people have eaten a piece of strong-smelling lamb somewhere before and are hesitant to try it again. The price fluctuates between $8 and $10 per pound, whereas the exact same quality at specialty butcher shops or premium organic supermarkets can easily skyrocket to $14 to $18 per pound. A large primal cut brought home is enough to last for the whole week, You can wrap it in herbs and oven roast it whole for a crowded weekend meal, or cut off the edges to cook a Mediterranean-style stew. For families with elderly members or young children sensitive to strong flavors, this is a major plus, because most complaints about lamb in the past have stemmed from the exact odor that this imported product line almost entirely lacks. Thawing it overnight in the refrigerator instead of leaving it out at room temperature will keep the meat quality almost completely intact when cooking. If you are not used to buying large whole primal cuts, you can ask the meat counter staff to cut it down into 2 smaller portions right on the spot, making it both easier to store and convenient for meals that do not require hosting a large crowd. This price is usually stable year-round, without having to wait for seasonal markdowns like many other types of meat. Pork tenderloin. If you have to choose a product that truly represents the definition of delicious, nutritious, and affordable at Costco, pork tenderloin deserves to top the list. This is the least exercised muscle on the pig, so it is naturally tender without requiring any intervention from the manufacturer. A complete contrast to the mechanically blade tenderized beef steaks mentioned in the previous section. Priced at just $3 to $4 per pound, a package typically consists of 2 separate vacuum-sealed pouches with 2 tenderloin loins in each pouch, making it convenient to portion out and freeze for gradual use over multiple meals. The excess fat and silver skin have almost entirely been trimmed off beforehand, so however many pounds you buy is exactly how much you can eat, with no wasteful trimming required like many types of pork sold at conventional markets. Many people used to hesitate to cook lean pork for fear of it being tough and dry, but the very unexercised characteristic of this tenderloin section solves that exact worry, completely unlike the meat cuts that require technological intervention to achieve a similar level of tenderness. Storing it in the freezer is also quite convenient thanks to the vacuum packaging in separate pairs. Every time you need to use it, you just take out exactly 1 pouch without having to thaw the entire large package. The final item is about to be revealed, and this is the exact reason why many high-end restaurants have to scramble for the supply right from the production stage. USDA prime steaks, ribeye, and New York strip. Each year, only about 2 to 3% of beef in the US achieves the prime grade, and the vast majority of that is bought up almost entirely by high-end steakhouses before it ever reaches retail counters. Costco still has this item available regularly right on its shelves, a complete contrast to the choice line that underwent blade tenderizing, mentioned at the beginning. What makes the difference is the natural marbling evenly distributed throughout the meat fibers, which melts when encountering heat and helps the meat become tender and fragrant without needing any mechanical intervention. Buying at a conventional supermarket chain, this same quality can cost $25 to $35 per pound, whereas Costco, thanks to its position as one of the largest meat retailers in the world, has driven the price down to $10 to $15 per pound. Because the meat is already tender enough from its natural marbling, Costco does not need to use blade tenderizing machines on this product line, meaning you can confidently pan-sear it to a perfect medium rare without having to trade off the bacterial risks like the choice line warned about previously. If you only have enough budget for one luxury item out of today's entire list, this should be the top priority choice, because the price difference compared to the outside is significantly larger than any other item mentioned. The next time you stand in front of the meat counter, just spend an extra 10 seconds reading the label, looking for the words solid muscle instead of formed, checking whether it states blade tenderized, and noticing whether it is pre-packaged goods or just cut on the spot. These 3 small details determine most of your meal's quality without costing an extra dime. You might think that everything at Costco tastes great and is worth buying, but the truth is the complete opposite. Alongside some truly excellent cuts of meat, there are also items that look appealing in ads yet end up tasting disappointing, even making you feel like you wasted money because they don't live up to expectations. And in this video, we're breaking down which items are genuinely worth every dollar, and which ones you should avoid if you don't want your meal to fall flat. Watch until the end to see which products are the best, and which ones are the worst at Costco. You'd be awesome if you liked this video. 1. Kansas City Steak Company Filet Mignon. If you're looking for a cut of meat that is truly fail-proof in quality at Costco, the Kansas City Steak Company Filet Mignon is one of the safest bets you can make. Many people describe it as so tender that it practically comes apart with the slightest pressure of a knife. Exactly the kind of melts-in-your-mouth experience steak lovers crave. Unlike ribeye, which can have tough connective tissue or heavy pockets of fat, filet mignon has its own elegance, silky texture, mild but refined flavor, and a softness that appeals even to those who don't prefer fattier cuts. What sets this filet apart from many others is its 28-day aging process, which deepens the flavor and enhances natural tenderness. Customers often mention that once cooked, the filet retains its juiciness exceptionally well, never dry or stringy, even when prepared simply in a cast iron skillet or air fryer. If you check Costco's website reviews, you'll see this product holds an almost perfect 5-star rating, something extremely rare even among premium items. Shoppers praise everything from the packaging quality and thickness of each cut to the dining experience being comparable to a high-end steakhouse. Filet mignon is also incredibly easy to cook, making it ideal even for people who aren't confident in the kitchen. All you need is a sprinkle of salt and pepper, a quick sear for a golden crust, and a few minutes in the oven. No complicated sauce is required. The meat itself delivers all the flavor. For anyone searching for the best value premium steak at Costco, the Kansas City Steak Company Filet Mignon is easily a top contender. It offers tenderness, consistency, high quality, and versatility for every occasion. A weekend dinner, an anniversary, a small gathering, or simply treating yourself to an exceptional meal. 2. Japanese A5 Wagyu New York Strip Loin Roast. In the world of premium beef, few names spark as much curiosity or awe as Japanese A5 Wagyu. So when Costco added the Wagyu New York Strip Loin Roast to its online selection, many shoppers were stunned. Most people never expect to buy restaurant-quality Wagyu so easily. What makes this roast special is its A5 marbling, ultra-fine white fat woven throughout the meat, creating a texture so soft that it nearly dissolves the moment it touches your tongue. Costco's strip loin roast typically weighs around 11 pounds, meaning you're not just buying a meal. You're taking home an entire culinary project. At around $80 per pound, the price might sound steep, but for people who've experienced authentic Wagyu, it's a very reasonable cost for a truly unforgettable experience. On Costco's website, the roast receives near-perfect ratings, with customers raving about its juiciness, rich aroma, and signature buttery melt-in-the-mouth sensation. One of the best things about Wagyu is that you don't need a complicated recipe. Just slice it into portions, sear them quickly to melt the fat, and form a lightly caramelized crust, and that's it. The natural marbling provides plenty of flavor, so heavy seasoning is unnecessary. For family gatherings or holiday celebrations, a properly roasted Wagyu becomes the centerpiece of the entire table. However, it's worth noting that A5 Wagyu is very rich, and large amounts can feel overwhelming because the fat content is far higher than regular steak. This is why people usually enjoy Wagyu in small portions. Fortunately, with Costco's full roast, you can divide it into sections, freeze portions, and enjoy multiple meals while maintaining quality. If you want to try a luxurious cut with extraordinary flavor, something completely different from everyday steak, Costco's A5 Wagyu is absolutely worth experiencing at least once. 3. Tomahawk Steak. Rastelli Market Fresh. If you want to bring that upscale steakhouse experience straight into your home kitchen, the tomahawk from Rastelli Market Fresh is the cut many shoppers can't stop talking about. A tomahawk steak is already a symbol of boldness and indulgence, a massive cut of meat with a long bone that instantly turns the dish into a showpiece. At Costco, Rastelli's tomahawk is made with USDA choice Black Angus beef, meaning the quality is ensured right from the selection stage. What makes this steak so highly rated is its thick, evenly distributed marbling. As it cooks, the fat slowly melts, giving each slice a tender, juicy, deeply flavorful texture that even a classic ribeye can struggle to match. Weighing around 38-42 ounces, this tomahawk is big enough to serve 2 to 3 people for a special dinner or act as the main attraction for a weekend gathering. Despite its intimidating appearance, a tomahawk is actually very approachable to cook. Simply sear it to build a beautiful crust, then finish it in the oven or grill it indirectly on the barbecue. Many buyers say they were surprised by just how tender and delicious it turned out. Some even call it the best steak we ever had at home. Compared to ordering a tomahawk at a restaurant, where a single serving can exceed $100, buying it at Costco gives you an enormous cost advantage. You control the doneness and the style of cooking, and still enjoy the satisfaction of preparing a dish with a real wow factor. 4. West End Cuisine Mediterranean-style chicken skewers. When you hear Mediterranean-style chicken skewers, you probably picture fragrant herbs, hints of lemon, garlic, pepper, and a subtle Mediterranean spice kick. Unfortunately, those expectations nearly disappear with West End Cuisine's version sold at Costco. Yes, it's convenient, fully cooked, heat and eat, and perfect for fast dinners. But the issue is that convenience doesn't come with the flavor the name suggests. The product is marketed as Mediterranean, but in reality the herb flavor is extremely faint. There are none of the bright, refreshing notes you'd expect from this cuisine. No lemon zestiness, no depth of spice. Instead, the most pronounced element is salt. 2 small skewers already contain nearly a third of your recommended daily sodium intake, throwing the overall flavor completely off balance. For anyone sensitive to salt or trying to reduce sodium, this is definitely not the product to choose. Another drawback is the texture. Because the skewers are pre-cooked, the meat easily becomes dry if reheated even slightly too long. Many buyers report that the chicken isn't as tender as they hoped, making the eating experience underwhelming. This is especially disappointing given that true Mediterranean grilled chicken should be soft, aromatic, and full of seasoning. That said, the product does have a few positives. It's neatly packaged, fast to prepare, and works for busy people who just need something to toss on a salad in minutes. But when it comes to flavor, the most important factor, this one simply doesn't live up to the price or the expectation set by its name. 5. Rastelli's Pork Ribeye Steaks. When people hear the name pork ribeye, they naturally expect a cut of pork that mimics the tenderness and juiciness of beef ribeye, one of the most beloved steak cuts. That's also why many Costco shoppers decided to try Rastelli's Pork Ribeye Steaks, hoping to find a pork option with balanced fat, a tender bite, great flavor, and easy cooking. Unfortunately, the reality is far from those expectations. The first disappointment is the texture. Beef ribeye is famous for its beautiful marbling, giving it that melt-in-your-mouth feel. But with this pork version, the texture is noticeably firm and can even turn dry unless cooked with extreme precision. Many customers mention that regardless of the method, grilling, pan-searing, or air-frying, the steak still lacks the juiciness and tenderness the ribeye name suggests. Another issue is the flavor. A steak that swaps beef for pork can still be delicious if processed well, but here the meat has a very mild, almost forgettable taste. When you find yourself adding lots of seasoning or sauces just to make the dish appealing, it's usually a sign that the core ingredient isn't compelling on its own. This becomes even more obvious when compared with other high-quality pork products already available at Costco, options that are better priced and consistently flavorful. With Rastelli's Pork Ribeye Steaks, the price isn't particularly low, yet the eating experience doesn't match what you're paying for. Of course, if you enjoy pork and want a simple, easy-to-cook cut, this product can still work for basic meals like meal prep. But if your goal is to find a pork steak that feels tender and satisfying like a beef ribeye, this is not the ideal choice. Like the video if this surprised you. 6. Amilu Cranberry and Jalapeno Chicken Meatballs. Among Costco's ready-to-eat meat products, the Amilu Cranberry and Jalapeno Chicken Meatballs are one of the most surprising items. Just the combination alone sounds unusual. Chicken, cranberries, and jalapeno. 3 ingredients that don't seem like they should work together, yet they balance surprisingly well. When you take a bite, you get a gentle sweetness from the cranberries paired with a mild tingling heat from the jalapeno, creating a pleasant harmony instead of the harsh or overpowering flavor many people fear. A major advantage of these meatballs is their consistent flavor. Both the cranberries and jalapeno are evenly mixed throughout each piece, so you don't end up with one meatball that's too sweet and another that's too spicy. This makes the dish suitable for a wide range of tastes, even those who can't handle heat very well. Many buyers say the flavor becomes even more addictive when paired with a bit of goat cheese or a light cream sauce. Beyond taste, the health aspect also makes this product stand out. The chicken is raised without antibiotics, and the fat content is much lower than traditional beef meatballs. For anyone counting calories or looking for a quick meal that isn't too guilty, this is a very practical option. You can serve them as appetizers, toss them into salads, mix them with pasta, or simply air fry them for a high-protein snack. The convenience is another highlight. Clean packaging, quick cooking, and great for busy days when you need something fast that still has a unique, enjoyable flavor. 7. Rastelli grass-fed Frenched lamb racks. Lamb isn't something that appears regularly in most households, but for those who love a rich, slightly wild, and distinctly unique flavor, the Rastelli grass-fed Frenched lamb racks at Costco are absolutely worth considering. This is a visually impressive cut. Long, clean Frenched bones, a thin exterior layer of fat, and bright, evenly colored red meat. Just placing the entire rack on a baking sheet already makes it look restaurant-worthy. The standout feature of this lamb rack is its grass-fed Australian lamb, a region well known for producing consistently high-quality, clean, and naturally flavored lamb. This gives the meat a deep but not overpowering taste, with savory fat that enhances the flavor without being heavy. When cooked to the right doneness, each slice is tender and juicy and releases an aroma that neither beef nor pork can replicate. Many people worry that lamb has a strong, unpleasant smell, but Rastelli's version receives plenty of praise for being mild, clean-tasting, and aromatic in a pleasant way. Thanks to the well-trimmed French presentation, the rack looks incredibly elegant, perfect for family dinners, Christmas parties, or any evening when you want a fine dining-at-home moment. On Costco's website, the product gets many positive reviews for freshness, flavor, and packaging quality. Some shoppers even choose lamb rack as their signature holiday dish because it's beautiful, delicious, and much easier to cook than most people expect. 8. Texas Tamale Co. Beef Tamales. When people think of tamales, they imagine hearty corn masa filled with savory meat, warm, aromatic, and satisfying after just one or two pieces. That's why the Texas Tamale Co. beef tamales at Costco often attract high expectations. Unfortunately, once opened and tasted, this product falls short in several key areas. The biggest disappointment is the size. Tamales are traditionally filling, but these are extremely small, almost just a bite or two each. Many customers say they had to eat 10 or more just to feel full, which makes the portion value unreasonable. When you buy a box of tamales, you expect satisfaction, but here, that's exactly what's missing. The flavor doesn't redeem the experience either. The beef filling is described as seasoned, but in reality it's quite bland, lacking depth, and the signature taste people typically associate with tamales. When a tamale is both small and under-seasoned, the overall experience becomes even more disappointing. Another surprising issue is the sodium content. Just 2 tiny tamales contain nearly 500 mg of sodium, or about 24% of the recommended daily intake. That means eating enough tamales to feel full could easily push your sodium intake to a much higher level than expected. For anyone trying to eat healthier or reduce salt, this product is almost certainly not a good fit. To be fair, Texas tamales do have a couple of strengths. They're convenient, quick to heat, and work as a small snack when you're too busy to cook. But when you factor in price, flavor, and fullness, the 3 things tamales should deliver, this product clearly misses the mark. 9. Fully cooked roasted duck with orange sauce. Among Costco's premium ready-to-eat dishes, the fully cooked roasted duck with orange sauce is one of the items that surprises shoppers the most because its quality far exceeds expectations. It's not an everyday meal, nor something you buy to eat on the run. This is the kind of dish meant for special occasions when you want to serve an impressive dinner without spending hours in the kitchen. What makes this duck stand out is the white Pekin breed, known for its tender meat, mild flavor, and naturally juicy texture. The producer also follows strict farming standards, giving many shoppers peace of mind when serving this dish for family gatherings. Since the duck is fully cooked, all you need to do is reheat it properly to enjoy rich, flavorful meat without worrying about dryness or toughness. The highlight, however, is the orange sauce. This isn't a thin, watery sauce. It's a thick, glossy glaze with a balanced sweetness and a bright citrus tang that pairs beautifully with duck. When drizzled over the skin after crisping it in the oven, the sauce seeps into the meat, creating a harmonious blend of richness, sweetness, and acidity. The final flavor tastes more like something prepared in a European restaurant than a store-bought ready meal. Many shoppers consider this one of the best items in Costco's prepared food category because of its convenience and consistently great flavor. Even without advanced cooking skills, you can create a stunning main dish suitable for Thanksgiving, Christmas, or any weekend dinner when you want to change things up. 10. Japanese A5 Wagyu Bacon Wrapped Cubes. Among the most disappointing meat products at Costco, the Japanese A5 Wagyu Bacon Wrapped Cubes are perhaps the ones people regret buying the most. Not because they're cheap, but because they carry the A5 Wagyu name, which is associated with perfection, melt-in-your-mouth tenderness, beautiful marbling, and deep, luxurious flavor. Those expectations make the actual experience even more disappointing. The biggest issue is the preparation and format. Wagyu is meant to be sliced thin or cut into moderately sized pieces so the fat can render evenly during cooking. But when cut into tiny cubes and wrapped in bacon, all the natural advantages of Wagyu are essentially lost. The bacon's strong, salty flavor overpowers the delicate, buttery notes that make Wagyu special. The result tastes more like ordinary smoky pork than a premium Japanese beef product. Customers also report that the cubes are dry, tough, and chewy, something that should never happen with A5 Wagyu. The signature marbling, which normally melts to create that silky texture, doesn't have time to do its job because the small cubes cook far too quickly. For a regular steak, this might be acceptable, but for A5 Wagyu, it's a deal breaker. Wrapping the cubes in bacon also leads to uneven cooking. The outside burns while the inside dries out, leaving you with none of the smooth, melt-in-your-mouth quality that Wagyu is supposed to deliver. That's why this product receives extremely low ratings, often accompanied by blunt comments like, "Don't choose this if it's your first time trying Wagyu." What makes this item especially disappointing isn't just the poor flavor. It's the high price and high expectations. Consumers pay a premium hoping to experience authentic A5 Wagyu, only to feel like they wasted money on a product that fails to deliver any of Wagyu's signature qualities. Costco has many excellent meat options, but not every item is worth your money. Knowing which products truly deliver and which ones are all hype helps you shop smarter and avoid waste, and choose foods that your family will actually enjoy. Next time you visit Costco, stick to the items that are genuinely worth buying, and confidently skip the ones that often disappoint. Which tip from the video surprised you the most? Do you think buying meat at Costco is always a great deal? I used to believe that simply having an executive membership card in my wallet meant I was shopping at the right place, at the right price. The truth is, some trays of meat look incredibly appealing, but quietly cause you to pay more, get lower value, or consume more sodium and additives than you realize. Today, I'm pointing out 7 types of meat I've completely stopped buying, and at least 2 of them are probably still in your cart every single week. You'd be awesome if you liked this video. 1. Pre-cut chuck roast. When people hear chuck roast, they immediately think of steaming pots of braised beef, fork-tender beef stew, or affordable steaks that are surprisingly satisfying. It's traditionally considered a budget-friendly cut, easy to cook and perfect for family meals. At Costco, the chuck roast trays are neatly cubed and tightly wrapped in glossy plastic, looking clean and professional. The price hovers around $12 per pound. On the surface, that sounds reasonable, even acceptable in a time when meat prices keep climbing. But here's the interesting part. Just a few steps away, that exact same shoulder cut, in the form of a whole chuck roll, costs only about $7.20 per pound. It's not a lower grade. It's not a different cut. It's the same muscle structure, just not yet broken down. When you choose the pre-cut tray, you're paying nearly 40% more simply for someone to hold a knife for a few minutes behind the counter. That difference may seem small if you're only buying a few pounds, but a chuck roll typically weighs 18 to 20 pounds. Multiply that out, and you could easily leave $80 to $100 on the table just for convenience. To put it in perspective, if a household uses about 10 pounds of chuck per month for braising, stews, and stir-fries, buying the pre-cut version would cost roughly $120. Buying the whole roll would cost about $72. That's nearly a $50 difference for the exact same cut of beef. And that's just 1 month. And here's the part almost no one talks about. When you buy a whole chuck roll, you're not just getting stew meat. Hidden beneath the shoulder section is the Denver steak, also known as zabaton. This cut is surprisingly tender, beautifully marbled, deeply flavorful, and highly respected among steak enthusiasts. Purchased individually elsewhere, it can run $25 to $30 per pound. But when you buy the whole roll, you're effectively getting that gold mine at an average price just over $7 per pound. With a little trimming and portioning, you end up with stew meat for the week and premium steak for weekend grilling, at a price that feels almost free compared to buying it separately. There's a completely different sense of control when you understand the structure of the cut, know exactly what you're slicing, and decide how each portion will be used, versus grabbing a pre-packaged tray that's already been decided for you. And this story doesn't stop with chuck roast. It repeats itself with another steak that almost everyone has picked up at Costco at least once. 2. Pre-cut ribeye. If chuck roast is the budget-friendly family option, then ribeye is the king of the steak case. Those beautifully marbled ribeyes, with white fat evenly woven through the meat under tight plastic wrap, are genuinely hard to resist. They're pre-cut, thick, and look like you could take them home and throw them straight onto a hot pan. But from the perspective of someone who closely follows the U.S. consumer market, I'll say this plainly. Buying pre-cut ribeye at Costco is one of the fastest ways to automatically pay more without even realizing it. Most pre-cut ribeye trays are priced about $4 more per pound than the whole ribeye roast sitting right next to them. It's not a different grade. It's not prime versus choice. It's the exact same rib section, just sliced into individual steaks. Do the math. An average whole ribeye weighs about 16 pounds. Multiply that by a $4 price difference, and you're looking at $64 left on the table simply because you didn't want to hold a knife for a few minutes. To make it more concrete, a steak dinner for a family of 4 might use around 4 pounds of ribeye. If you buy the pre-cut version, you could be paying nearly $16 extra for just one meal. Repeat that a few times a year, and that's enough to cover an entire additional roast. And that's only the listed price difference. It doesn't even account for the fat you're losing. And the price gap isn't the most important part. The real value lies in the trimming. That outer layer of white fat, many people assume is excess. When you buy pre-cut steaks, that portion is often removed before it ever reaches you. In the U.S. carnivore community, that fat is often called white gold. Beef fat isn't waste. You can render it into pure tallow to fry eggs, sear steaks, sauté vegetables, or replace industrial seed oils in everyday cooking. Some people even use tallow in skincare because of its stability and nutrient profile. Butcher shops used to give fat away for free. Today, demand has risen to the point where beef fat sells for over $4 per pound. When you choose pre-cut ribeye, you're not just paying extra for someone else to slice it. You're also giving up a valuable ingredient that should have been yours. When you buy the whole roast instead, you control the thickness of your steaks and keep every bit of that fat to use as you see fit. Ribeye is still ribeye, but the way you buy it determines whether you're spending strategically or quietly paying a convenience fee. 3. Pre-packaged ground beef, large tray. Large trays of ground beef at Costco always feel safe. The price looks good, the quantity is generous, and it's convenient for meal prep all week. When people see labels like 80-20 or 88-12, many assume that choosing the right fat ratio is all that matters. But if you genuinely care about quality, this is one item you should pause for a few seconds before placing in your cart. Large-scale ground beef is typically blended from multiple cuts to reach the target fat percentage. The number on the label may be accurate, but what you don't see is the internal texture of the meat fibers. Many shoppers report that large tray ground beef can feel overly fine, slightly pasty, and release more liquid than expected during cooking. Burgers struggle to develop a proper sear. The meat tends to shrink, and it loses juiciness. That's the result of large-scale mechanical processing and blending. When beef is handled, ground, and packaged in high volume, it no longer retains the natural coarse texture you get from grinding a whole cut directly. The meat industry has also faced controversy in the past surrounding lean, finely textured beef, what the media labeled pink slime. While regulations and standards have since tightened and improved, that episode highlighted something important. When meat is heavily restructured and processed, the eating experience can change significantly. On a practical level, if a family uses 5 to 7 pounds of ground beef each week for tacos, burgers, spaghetti, or meatballs. Inconsistent quality will repeat itself meal after meal. You may not notice a dramatic difference in one cooking session, but after a few months you may realize your burgers don't taste as satisfying. The meat releases more water, and you need heavier seasoning to compensate. And when you add extra spices, cheese, or sauce just to improve texture and flavor, you're quietly spending more without realizing it. The second issue is convenience. Again, prepackaged ground beef saves you a few minutes, but it also removes control. You don't know exactly which cuts were used or how fresh it is compared to beef ground in-store that same day. And because ground beef has a much larger surface area exposed to air, it oxidizes and deteriorates faster than whole cuts. The solution isn't complicated. If your Costco offers in-house ground beef made daily from prime or choice trim, that's a far better option. Or even simpler, buy a chuck roast, cube it, and grind it yourself at home. When you grind your own beef, you fully control the fat ratio, texture, and freshness. The difference in burgers or meatballs is noticeable from the very first bite. Like the video if this surprised you. 4. Pre-marinated beef, carne asada, marinated cuts. There's no denying it. Trays of carne asada or pre-marinated beef at Costco look incredibly appealing. The deep red color, evenly scattered onions, and glossy marinade coating every slice make it easy to picture throwing it on the grill for a weekend gathering. For busy shoppers, this feels like a lifesaver. No marinating, no planning, just open and cook. But pause for a few seconds and take a closer look. The first trap is weight. When you pay around $15 for a tray of marinated beef, as much as 15 to 20% of that weight may be marinade, onions, and liquid seasoning. You're paying steak prices for water and inexpensive spices. That means each pound you buy isn't entirely meat. If you calculate carefully, the true cost per pound of actual beef may be significantly higher than you think. In food retail, there's an uncomfortable reality that rarely gets said out loud. Cuts that may not look as attractive for display sometimes get repurposed into marinated products. Dark, heavily seasoned marinades can mask slightly faded color or flavor that's no longer at its peak. That doesn't mean every pre-marinated tray falls into this category, but you have no way of knowing what the meat looked like before it was coated in sauce. On top of that, pre-marinated meats often contain very high sodium levels to enhance flavor and extend shelf life. Sugar and flavor enhancers are also commonly used. You may think you're buying high-quality protein, but you could be consuming far more salt and sugar than necessary, especially if this becomes a regular family meal. Meanwhile, the solution is much simpler. Buy a fresh cut of beef, choose the piece that looks best to you, and use a Kirkland dry seasoning blend or mix your own spices at home. It takes less than 30 seconds to season and toss evenly. You know exactly what you're eating. No excess liquid, no sauce covering up the surface, no paying for ingredients that aren't beef. Pre-marinated carne asada sells convenience and the feeling that everything has been done for you. But from a smart consumer standpoint, it's one of the easiest places to spend more money for less actual value. 5. Shrimp cocktail. This is one of the most subtle false deals at Costco. Shrimp cocktail looks upscale and convenient, with pink shrimp arranged neatly in a circle around a cup of sauce in the center. It immediately feels party-ready. For many people, it's the perfect appetizer when guests come over. No prep required. Just lift the lid and set it on the table. The convenience alone makes it hard to say no. The average price of a shrimp cocktail tray runs around $13 to $14 per pound. Meanwhile, in Costco's frozen section, you can buy wild-caught Argentine red shrimp for about $10 per pound. That's nearly a $4 difference per pound, just for someone to cook, thaw, and arrange it for you. For a tray weighing several pounds, that markup adds up quickly. Most shrimp cocktail is pre-cooked, then frozen, then thawed again for display. That process may sound standard, but it directly affects texture and natural sweetness. Many shoppers notice the shrimp can feel slightly mushy, less firm, or oddly watery and bland. That's not you being picky. It's the result of multiple handling and temperature changes before it reaches you. Then there's the cocktail sauce in the center. It looks appealing, but if you flip the label over, you'll often find sugar, corn syrup, and preservatives. What many consider a light, high-protein snack can quietly come with a significant sugar load if you dip generously. For anyone managing weight, blood pressure, or following a low-carb diet, that detail matters. The alternative is simple and right there in the freezer aisle. Wild-caught Argentine red shrimp are not only less expensive, but they give you full control. Thaw them properly, boil for just a few minutes, then shock in ice water to lock in their natural snap and sweetness. No overcooking, no mushy texture, no sitting under display lights for hours. If you want sauce, make your own with fresh lemon, a pinch of salt, or melted butter. No corn syrup, no additives. Shrimp cocktail sells itself on readiness. But when you look closely, you're paying for polished presentation and convenience, not superior quality. And once you understand that, it's hard to see that tray as a true bargain anymore. 6. Rotisserie chicken. This may be the most controversial one. Costco's rotisserie chicken is practically an icon. $5 for a golden, fragrant chicken you can smell from the parking lot. Many families see it as a secret weapon for saving both time and money. And yes, on the surface, the listed price is undeniably cheap. But take a closer look at the ingredient label before calling it a steal. To keep the chicken juicy under heat lamps for hours, it's not simply chicken and salt. The injected solution typically includes brine, sugar, modified food starch, and so-called natural flavors. That means you're not just eating chicken, you're consuming added liquid designed to retain moisture and enhance taste. If you follow a clean eating plan, keto, or carnivore diet, this is worth serious consideration. Sugar and starch are not what most people expect in what appears to be a straightforward protein source. And because the chicken is held hot for extended periods, the texture can become inconsistent. The breast meat may dry out if it sits too long, while the meat near the bones can turn overly soft or slightly mushy from absorbing excess solution. There's also the practical issue of freshness after purchase. Rotisserie chicken spoils quickly. If you don't finish it the same day, the flavor can noticeably change by the next. The natural sweetness fades, and sometimes a distinct, reheated smell develops. For a product kept warm for hours, that isn't surprising. Meanwhile, the alternative is just as simple, and often just as affordable. A 2-pack of fresh Kirkland chickens typically runs around $1.30 per pound. Season them yourself with salt, butter, or a dry rub, place them in the oven, and let the heat do the work. You get crispy skin, true roasted flavor, and actual just chicken. No hidden sugars, no starches, no hard-to-pronounce additives. This may be one of the clearest examples of how a low price doesn't automatically equal the best long-term health choice. Once you understand that, your decision won't be driven by the aroma at the entrance, but by what's truly inside the chicken. 7. Pre-cut filet mignon. Filet mignon is called the crown of the cow for a reason. It's the most tender cut, one of the most expensive, and also one of the easiest to mark up. At Costco, those neatly tied, round medallions of tenderloin often sit at the top price tier, sometimes approaching $30 per pound when sold individually. They look elegant, perfect for a date night, and absolutely worth it. And that feeling alone is often enough to make people reach for their wallets without thinking twice. But here's what rarely gets said directly. Once a fillet is cut into individual steaks, its surface area exposed to air increases immediately. Oxygen starts doing its job. Oxidation happens hour by hour under supermarket lighting. You'll often notice fillets that appear lighter pink, slightly pale or dull. Not because the meat was low quality to begin with, but because it has been exposed for too long. For a premium cut like this, every hour of lost freshness means you're paying top dollar for gradual decline. Filet already has less fat and less intense flavor than ribeye. When freshness drops, it becomes even more likely to taste mild and underwhelming. That means you could be paying close to $30 per pound for a steak that's no longer at its peak. By comparison, a whole tenderloin sealed in vacuum packaging has minimal exposure to oxygen. The meat maintains its natural deep red color, firm texture, and original sweetness. And just as important is the price difference. Whole tenderloin is often at least $8 to $10 less per pound than pre-cut filet. For a piece weighing 6 to 8 pounds, you're talking about dozens of dollars disappearing simply because you didn't want to slice it yourself. There's another factor. When you buy pre-cut fillets, you accept whatever size the meat counter decides. Some pieces are too thin, some uneven, and some from the tapered tail end but priced the same as center cuts. When you buy the whole tenderloin, you control everything. Want thick 2-inch steakhouse-style cuts? Prefer smaller medallions for hot pot? You decide, not the plastic tray under bright lights. Bonus: the most hit-or-miss meat at Costco. If I had to name the most unpredictable item at the Costco meat counter, I wouldn't hesitate to point to the seasoned tri-tip. On the outside, it looks convincing. An even coating of reddish-brown seasoning, tightly sealed packaging, ready to go straight onto the grill. It sounds like the perfect solution for a busy weeknight dinner. But that very layer of seasoning is where the risk begins. Tri-tip is a great cut when handled properly, but once it's pre-marinated, you lose almost all control. Repeated feedback across consumer forums is consistent. It's overly salty. Not simply well-seasoned, but aggressively salty to the point of completely masking the natural beef flavor. What should be a steak with a rich aroma and a subtle sweet finish turns into something that tastes more like heavily processed salted meat. You also can't clearly see the quality underneath. The thick marinade and dark seasoning conceal everything. You won't know whether the cut has excessive connective tissue or large fat pockets until after it's cooked. Many buyers report having to discard a noticeable portion because it was too tough or nearly impossible to chew. The seasoned version typically costs $2 to $3 more per pound than the unseasoned tri-tip. For a 3 to 4 pound piece, that's nearly $10 extra, essentially for excess salt and sauce. What should you buy? Instead, to avoid wasting money at Costco, Costco can still be a paradise if you know where to focus. The issue isn't stopping meat purchases altogether. It's stopping habit-based buying. Start with the simplest rule. Always look at the price per pound before looking at the total price on the package. Costco is very good at making a tray seem reasonable because the final dollar amount doesn't look too high. But when you compare it to a whole cut, you may notice a 30 to 40% difference, and that gap adds up quickly over time. You can also shift toward prioritizing whole cuts. Choose a ribeye roast instead of pre-cut steaks, a chuck roll instead of neatly packaged roast trays, a whole tenderloin instead of individually tied fillets. Not only are they more affordable, but they also have less exposure to oxygen, stay fresher, and give you full control over how they're cut, thickness, trimming, and how much fat you keep or remove. Don't forget to read the ingredient label before deciding. If a piece of meat requires too many lines of explanation to describe what it is, I put it back. I can season my own meat. I can boil my own shrimp. I can control my own ground beef. And this is something I have to remind myself often. 2% cashback doesn't make up for spending 30% more on convenience. Costco offers plenty of high-value products, but only if you shop intentionally. Buying meat smart isn't about finding the absolute lowest price. It's about understanding what you're actually paying for and deciding whether it's truly worth it. Is there a type of meat at Costco you've sworn never to buy a second time? Most people who shop at Costco are repeating the same mistake right at the meat counter. They think they're paying for convenience, but in reality, they're spending money on things that aren't worth it. Meanwhile, the real hidden gems that can help you eat better and cleaner and save hundreds of dollars are sitting right next to them, completely overlooked. And here are the strategies that will help you hack the price at the Costco meat section on your very next trip. You'd be awesome if you liked this video. 1. How to choose fresh meat. Most people walking into Costco are immediately drawn to those bright red cuts of meat under the display lights. They look incredibly fresh and appealing, but if you rely on color alone, you're trusting one of the most misleading indicators. That vibrant red can simply be the result of oxygen exposure or processing designed to make the meat look more attractive, not a true reflection of freshness. Experienced shoppers don't look at the lean first, they look at the fat. A quality cut typically has fat that appears creamy white, slightly glossy, and sometimes with a faint yellow tint. That's a sign of good sourcing and minimal oxidation. If the fat turns deep yellow or starts to look grayish, there's a good chance the meat has been sitting longer than you think, and the cooking quality won't meet expectations. Next comes one of the most important, but often ignored details: the pack date. Many people only check the sell-by date, but that doesn't tell you how long the meat has been sitting on the shelf. Flip the package over and check the pack date. You'll know whether that cut was just put out or has already been in storage for a while. The shorter the gap, the more reliable the freshness. Another overlooked sign is the amount of liquid in the tray. If you notice a lot of meat juices pooling in the corners, it's usually a sign the meat has started to lose its natural moisture. When cooked, these cuts tend to turn out drier and tougher. On the other hand, a clean tray with minimal liquid suggests the meat still retains its structure and freshness. Finally, use your sense of touch. A gentle press is all it takes. If the meat springs back quickly, that's a sign of good elasticity. Small details like these are what clearly separate an average choice from a cut that's truly worth your money. 2. Whole cuts for less. If you've ever walked past the whole cut meat section at Costco and thought, that's too big, too much hassle, you may have just missed one of the most powerful ways to save money, something very few people take advantage of. Because every time you buy pre-cut meat, you're essentially paying extra for processing. On average, that can add an extra $5 to $7 per pound, just for a few knife cuts. Meanwhile, large cuts like ribeye or brisket, weighing anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds, may seem overwhelming, but that's exactly where the real value lies. You're getting USDA prime quality meat at prices close to choice, simply because you're willing to do a bit of prep at home. More importantly, the quality is better. When the meat remains whole, the muscle structure stays intact, moisture is better retained, and there's significantly less surface exposure to air. This slows down fat oxidation, preserving both flavor and tenderness after cooking. That's why experienced buyers almost always choose whole cuts over pre-processed ones. The trend in 2026 is also shifting strongly toward home processing. Not because it's complicated, but because it gives you full control. You decide the thickness of your steaks, the cleanliness of your ground beef, and even how to use the fat. A single large cut can be broken down efficiently. The best portions for steaks, the rest ground into clean, high-quality beef, and any excess fat rendered into tallow for cooking or long-term storage. You're essentially preparing a high-quality food supply for multiple days, at a significantly lower cost. 3. The high cost of pre-cut meat. Pre-cut meat trays at Costco are always placed in highly accessible spots, neatly arranged, visually appealing, and almost designed to make you grab one without thinking. But that convenience is exactly where you end up spending more than necessary. When you pick up a pre-cut tray, you're paying for everything behind it, from packaging and display to processing. What many people don't realize is that pre-cut portions aren't always the best parts of the original cut. In many cases, they come from edge sections or pieces that no longer meet the standard to be sold whole. These are then trimmed, rearranged, and packaged to look more appealing. Once everything is sealed in a tray, it becomes nearly impossible to accurately judge the original quality of the meat. It doesn't stop there. Once meat is sliced into smaller portions, the surface area exposed to air increases significantly. This accelerates oxidation from the moment it's packaged. Even if the outside still looks fresh and vibrant, the flavor inside has already begun to degrade. With the cost of living continuing to rise, paying an extra 30 to 40% just for convenience is simply not a smart move, especially when you can easily do the same work at home with better results. With a sharp enough knife, you can cut steaks to your preferred thickness while preserving the meat's freshness and natural flavor. 4. Cooking mistakes that ruin meat quality. Many people are willing to spend good money on a beautiful, well-marbled cut of beef. But once they get home, they fall back into old cooking habits. The meat ends up overcooked or drowned in seasoning to the point where its natural flavor is completely lost. The truth is, high-quality cuts already have their own built-in flavor. Those streaks of marbling are what create tenderness and richness. When cooked properly, the fat deer melts and infuses into the muscle fibers. But if you cook it too long or start with heat that's too high, the internal juices get pushed out, leaving the meat dry and stripping away its true value. One very common mistake is taking meat straight from the fridge and putting it onto a hot pan. That sudden temperature shock causes the muscle fibers to contract quickly, making the meat tougher and drier. Simply letting the meat rest at room temperature for about 20 to 30 minutes before cooking can noticeably improve tenderness. If you want to elevate your cooking, try the reverse sear method. Start by slowly heating the meat at a low temperature so it cooks evenly from the inside. Then finish with a high heat sear to form a crust on the outside. This method gives you better control over doneness while preserving almost all of the moisture. Another technique many chefs are using is the cold sear method, placing the steak in a cold pan before turning on the heat. As the pan gradually heats up, the fat renders slowly and seeps back into the meat, resulting in a more tender, flavorful steak without needing excessive seasoning. Finally, there's one step that many people skip: letting the meat rest after cooking. If you cut into it immediately after taking it off the pan, all the juices will run out, leaving the inside dry. Let it rest for about 5 to 10 minutes, so the juices can redistribute evenly and retain that juicy texture. Like the video if this surprised you. 5. The hidden gems most people overlook at Costco. Most shoppers walk into Costco with a familiar instinct. If they see filet mignon or ribeye, they assume those are the best choices. The higher the price, the more confident they feel it must be worth it. But if you take a closer look, you'll realize you're often paying more for the name of the cut than for its actual value. Filet mignon is undeniably tender, but it has very little fat. That also means the flavor isn't as rich as many expect. It's easy to eat, but also easy to taste bland if not cooked properly. Ribeye, on the other hand, has beautiful marbling, but its price is often driven up simply because of its popularity. What's interesting is that there are many lesser-known cuts that can deliver an equally good, if not more exciting experience when handled correctly. One of the most overlooked hidden gems is chuck roast. At first glance, it doesn't look particularly appealing, and the lower price makes it easy to pass by. But when you use techniques like reverse sear or cold sear, the fat slowly renders and penetrates deep into the muscle fibers, creating a noticeable tenderness and rich flavor. At roughly half the cost, you can achieve a near-premium steak experience if you cook it right. Next is oxtail, something many people don't even consider when shopping. It may not look visually appealing, but it's an incredibly rich source of natural collagen. When simmered long enough, it produces a thick, deeply flavorful broth with a distinct natural sweetness. Instead of spending money on expensive supplements, this is a far more practical and valuable option if you know how to use it. If you want to take things a step further, pay attention to cuts that are extremely popular among locals, but often overlooked by Vietnamese shoppers. Picanha, also known as sirloin cap, is a perfect example. This cut features a signature fat cap that melts during cooking and renders back into the meat, creating a bold, unmistakable flavor. Flank steak is another great option worth trying. It has a pronounced grain, a strong beefy flavor, and works especially well with quick cooking methods like pan-searing or grilling. As long as you slice it correctly against the grain and avoid overcooking, you'll get a cut that's both tender and naturally juicy. The trend in 2026 is shifting clearly. Smart shoppers are no longer chasing premium-looking cuts. They're focusing on real value. A great piece of meat isn't defined by how expensive it is, but by how well you can unlock its full potential. 6. Popular meats that fall short on quality. There's a very common pattern when shopping at Costco. People buy out of habit. They see pre-cut pork trays or grab a hot, freshly roasted chicken because it's convenient and ready to go. Everything looks reasonable, quick, easy, and practical. But those familiar choices are often where quality is compromised the most, without you even realizing it. That $4.99 rotisserie chicken looks like an incredible deal, but behind that price is a fast-paced industrial farming model. The chickens are raised to grow quickly, resulting in meat that's tender but often overly soft and lacking natural firmness. To retain moisture and extend display time, these chickens typically contain high levels of sodium, along with carrageenan, a seaweed-derived additive used to hold water and create an artificially juicy texture. Recent studies suggest that frequent consumption of carrageenan may be linked to chronic gut inflammation in some sensitive individuals. Industrially raised pork at large retail chains faces similar issues. When animals are primarily fed grain-based diets, the fat profile becomes imbalanced, especially with elevated omega-6 levels. Over time, this can contribute to low-grade inflammation in the body, leading to water retention, bloating, or a heavy, sluggish feeling after meals. If you've ever felt more fatigued or noticed duller skin after eating meals like these, it's not a coincidence. It's often a sign that the nutritional quality of what you're consuming is lower than you think. The solution isn't complicated. Instead of buying pre-cooked rotisserie chicken, consider switching to whole chickens processed using the air-chilled method from the refrigerated section. With just about 15 minutes of prep in an air fryer, you can control the seasoning and completely avoid unnecessary preservatives. The same applies to pork. If you have the option, prioritize pasture-raised sources. While slightly more expensive, the difference in nutritional quality and how your body responds afterward is noticeably better. 7. Risks from packaging. Most meat at supermarkets is placed on foam trays and tightly wrapped in plastic film. It looks clean and convenient, but in reality, under strong LED lighting and ambient temperatures, this packaging can have unintended effects on the meat, especially the fat. When meat sits too long in sealed packaging, moisture and trapped air, combined with constant exposure to light, can cause slight changes in the fat. Some recent studies also suggest that microplastic particles may come into contact with the surface of food during display. This doesn't immediately make the meat unsafe, but over time it's becoming a growing concern for consumers. A common sign is when you open a tray and notice a slightly stale or enclosed smell, or the surface doesn't feel as fresh as it looked through the wrap. This isn't rare. It's a direct result of meat being sealed in packaging for too long. According to food industry experts, what you do right after bringing the meat home is critical. Instead of leaving it in the original tray, remove all the plastic wrap as soon as possible. Then, you can quickly rinse it with lightly salted water to remove any residue and pat it completely dry with clean paper towels. Drying the surface helps limit bacterial growth and preserves the meat's structure during storage. A more advanced step that experienced shoppers often use is transferring the meat into airtight bags or vacuum sealing it right after prep. This reduces air exposure and minimizes environmental impact, especially if you plan to refrigerate or freeze it for several days or longer. If you want to optimize from the start, try choosing meat trays that have just been restocked, as they've had less time sitting in packaging. 8. Trusting healthy labels. Without reading ingredients, words like organic, natural, or gluten-free instantly create a sense of trust at first glance. But in reality, these are often just surface-level cues designed to speed up your decision-making, not a full reflection of what's actually inside. This is what many consumer experts call greenwashing, when products are labeled with positive buzzwords to boost perceived value, even if the actual ingredients don't match. You'll find plenty of sausages or bacon marketed as healthy, but once you flip the package over, the ingredient list tells a completely different story. Sugar, modified starches like tapioca starch, and various vegetable oils are still clearly present, even though the front label doesn't mention them. The same pattern shows up in products that seem like better choices. Some margarines are promoted as heart-healthy, but a closer look reveals ingredients like palm oil, artificial flavorings, and additives used to enhance taste. These details aren't always highlighted, yet they directly impact the product's nutritional value. Relying only on the front of the package makes it easy to overlook the most important part: the ingredient list. That's the section that truly reflects what you're consuming. Experienced shoppers take a few extra seconds to read it carefully instead of trusting what's boldly printed on the front. A quick way to evaluate a product is by the length of the ingredient list. If it's long or filled with hard-to-recognize names, it's usually a sign the product is more processed than necessary. On the other hand, items with short, simple ingredient lists are generally safer and better choices. 9. Wasting the most valuable parts of food. One of the most common mistakes in modern kitchens is unintentionally discarding the most valuable parts of food. Many people trim off fat, throw away connective tissue, or discard bones simply because they think those parts aren't good. But in reality, these are often the most nutrient-dense components you're wasting. In recent years, products like concentrated bone broth or clean beef tallow have been sold at premium prices in specialty food stores. Yet the raw materials to make them are already sitting in your kitchen every day. Beef fat is the clearest example. When trimming meat, many people throw it away, but if you save it and render it properly, you'll get a natural, high-heat stable fat that's ideal for cooking, without breaking down as quickly as many industrial oils. It's also one of the best ways to help absorb fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, without relying on vegetable oils. Similarly, parts like tendons, bones, or oxtail are often overlooked. Many people only simmer them for broth and discard the rest, without realizing these are incredibly rich sources of collagen and minerals. When cooked long enough, the broth develops a slightly thick texture and a deep natural sweetness, and delivers far more nutritional value than many store-bought supplements. The nose-to-tail approach, using the entire animal, is making a strong comeback. Not just because it saves money, but because it allows you to fully unlock the true value of your food. 10. Choosing the wrong food sources. At Costco, it's easy to be drawn in by bright red salmon fillets or large packs of chicken breast that look like an incredible deal at first glance. But if you focus only on price and appearance, you may be making the wrong choice right from the source, without even realizing it. With salmon, the key factor isn't the color, it's how the fish is raised. Products labeled farm-raised typically come from industrial aquaculture environments, where fish are kept in high-density conditions and rely on processed feed. To achieve that appealing color, the fish are sometimes given added pigments in their diet. They may look great, but the nutritional profile is often less balanced than wild fish. Higher omega-6 levels can contribute to low-grade, chronic inflammation, and the overall protein quality is not as optimal. Chicken has a similar issue that many people overlook: the post-processing chilling method. If the packaging doesn't say air-chilled, there's a high chance the chicken was cooled in chlorinated ice water. This method is faster and increases weight because the meat absorbs water. In simple terms, you're paying for that added water without realizing it. This doesn't just affect value, it also impacts texture. Water-chilled chicken tends to be softer but lacks firmness. When cooked, it releases more liquid and doesn't retain its natural flavor. In contrast, air-chilled chicken is cooled using air, which helps preserve the meat's natural structure, resulting in better texture and a richer taste without dilution. The solution is straightforward if you pay closer attention. For fish, prioritize products labeled wild-caught, meaning they're sourced from natural environments. For chicken, look for air-chilled options to ensure you're paying for real meat quality, not added water. 11. Not choosing the best butter and eggs. Many Costco shoppers still follow a familiar habit: choosing butter and eggs based on price. If it's cheaper, they grab it. If the pack is bigger, even better. But they rarely stop to consider what's actually inside. In reality, these two food groups have a direct impact on the nutritional quality of what you consume every day. Butter isn't just a cooking fat. It's a source of important nutrients like vitamin K2 and beneficial fatty acids. When you choose conventional butter, especially lighter-colored varieties or those blended with vegetable oils, you may be unintentionally introducing ingredients that can contribute to low-grade inflammation. These types of butter often have a pale color, a less distinct aroma, and a lower price, but also lower nutritional value. In contrast, grass-fed butter shows a clear difference. You can recognize it immediately by its naturally deep yellow color and richer, more pronounced flavor. This comes from cows raised on a natural grass-based diet, which results in a more balanced and nutrient-dense product. Over time, the difference isn't just in taste, it's also in how your body responds after each meal. Eggs tell a similar story. The label, cage-free, sounds better, but it doesn't guarantee that hens are raised in natural conditions. They can still be kept in confined spaces and fed industrial diets. The difference between an average shopper and someone who truly understands value lies in how they choose. It's not about chasing convenience or attractive packaging. It's about focusing on real food quality. Don't let pre-cut meat trays or rotisserie chicken mislead you anymore. When you choose wisely, you're not just saving money, you're upgrading every meal you eat. Which part from the video surprised you the most? You can spend twice as much on a piece of meat and still walk away with a worse eating experience than yesterday's cheaper meal. It sounds illogical, but it happens every day in big supermarkets. Labels like premium organic or great value make shoppers feel reassured too quickly, while the real value hides in details most people never stop to examine. The issue isn't whether you buy cheap or expensive, it's whether you're buying the product for the right purpose. Once you understand why the same decision can lead to either a satisfying meal or complete disappointment, you'll know how to avoid costly mistakes that many people keep repeating, without even realizing it. You'd be awesome if you liked this video. 7. Spiral cut smoked ham. Most people pause only a few seconds in front of this meat case. The cart slows down, eyes land on the evenly sliced pink meat, and the brain does a quick calculation. This is an easy solution. No complicated menu planning. No long hours in the kitchen, and no awkward carving in front of others. That just needs something to get the meal done. Mindset is exactly why many shoppers add a spiral-cut ham to their cart. Almost automatically, it's ready, it's large, it's neatly sliced, and it only needs reheating to look like a proper centerpiece. For many people, spiral ham represents mental relief, minimal effort, yet the table still looks full, presentable, and appropriate for the occasion. That sense of convenience makes it easy to skip an important step, taking a closer look at how heavily processed the product really is. The large size gives a feeling of good value, but it also means the meat has been aggressively seasoned to retain flavor after reheating. The glaze packet is often seen as a bonus, yet it's usually where the highest concentration of sugar and additives sits. Spiral ham may look simple on the outside, but inside is a long chain of processing designed to keep the meat tender, salty enough, and stable for an extended time in refrigerated storage. Size is another issue. Spiral hams typically weigh several pounds or more. Once you buy one, you're almost guaranteed to eat it over multiple meals. The first meal feels convenient. The second still seems fine. By the third or fourth, the salt and sodium load starts to feel heavy. This isn't something you notice at checkout. It shows up days later when your body starts retaining water. You feel thirstier, or meals feel heavier, despite modest portions. Spiral ham is purchased for its sense of safety and convenience. But the real cost of that convenience doesn't show up at the register. It shows up afterward: repetitive meals, more salt than you expected, and portion control that's hard to manage because it's already bought, so it has to be finished. It's not an inherently bad product, but it's one that's very easy to buy on autopilot. And that autopilot is what ends up costing many people far more than they realize. 6. Kirkland Signature Ground Beef. Kirkland Signature Ground Beef is an item many shoppers add to their cart almost automatically. The package is large, the meat looks fresh, and the price per pound is noticeably lower than at regular supermarkets. For many families, it feels like a safe choice buy. Once use it for multiple meals, and it works for almost any recipe. But precisely because it's so familiar, very few people stop to look closely at what they're actually buying. The first appeal is the price. Compared to the general market, it's clearly reasonable for everyday cooking. Tacos, burgers, meatloaf, pasta sauces all work just fine. The fat ratio is enough to keep the meat from drying out, but not so much that the pan fills with grease. At a basic level, there's little to complain about, and that's why many people feel confident they made the right choice. But some important details don't appear on the front of the package. First is the source of the meat. The label isn't required to state where the cattle were raised, only where the meat was packaged. That means the beef in one package can be a blend sourced from multiple countries. For shoppers who care about traceability, this is a significant gap, yet it's rarely discussed. Second is how the cattle are raised. This is not grass-fed beef. Most of the cattle are raised in industrial systems and fed grain to accelerate weight gain. That doesn't make the meat bad, but it's very different from what many people imagine when they think of fresh, nutrient-rich beef. Beneficial fats like omega-3s are significantly lower than in grass-fed beef, even though the difference isn't obvious by appearance alone. A 3 to 5 pound pack makes sense for feeding a crowd, but for smaller households it requires immediate portioning and freezing. If that isn't done properly, the meat can lose moisture, change color, or decline in quality after thawing. Over time, the initial deal slowly erodes with each use. 5. Kirkland Beef Hot Dogs. There's a very familiar moment when standing in front of the long refrigerated case in the deli section. You spot Kirkland Beef Hot Dogs, and your hand almost reaches out automatically. The package is large, the hot dogs themselves are oversized, and they instantly feel like a good value. You picture grilling a few quickly for a lazy dinner, or tossing them in the freezer just in case. No overthinking, no comparing. This is the kind of product that makes shoppers feel like they're choosing something safe and reliable. That confidence comes from two powerful cues: 100% beef in size. Each hot dog is 1.5 to even twice the size of a standard one, creating the impression of real meat, hearty portions, and no fillers. But that same size hides an important detail. Many people overlook each hot dog already exceeds a standard serving. It's not that two hot dogs are excessive, one alone is enough to push calories and sodium quite high. And most people don't stop at one because the product isn't designed to make you feel done after a single piece. The 100% beef label also reassures shoppers too quickly. The beef is real, but that doesn't mean minimal processing. To maintain a soft, springy texture and consistent flavor when grilled beef, hot dogs rely on high amounts of salt stabilizers and flavorings. They taste good while hot, but if you pay attention, the saltiness and thirst often show up afterward, not during the meal. This is the kind of food that feels fine while eating, but the body reacts later. Another rarely discussed issue is how these hot dogs are used. Kirkland beef hot dogs are rarely bought for a specific meal. They're purchased to have on hand. And once they're there, they become the easiest option whenever cooking feels like a hassle. That convenience quietly increases how often they're eaten without any deliberate decision. No one says, let's eat more hot dogs for our health. It's simply, let's grill something quick. The problem isn't that these hot dogs are bad or not worth the money. The issue is how they slide into eating habits. They stop being an occasional treat and slowly become a default meal solution. And when a high-sodium, high-fat, oversized portion becomes the default, the cost is no longer financial. It's the long-term burden placed on the body as it adapts to heavier, saltier meals day after day. 4. Kirkland Organic Chicken Thighs. Many shoppers place their trust in the green organic label, the clean, simple packaging, and chicken thighs that look uniform, pale-skinned, and not overly industrial. A familiar thought forms almost instantly, at least this is the safer option. And it's that sense of one less thing to think about that leads many people to add the chicken to their cart without lingering any longer. In reality, Kirkland Organic Chicken Thighs are not a bad product. They are certified organic, raised without growth antibiotics, and fed under controlled standards. Compared to conventional chicken, this is clearly a step up. The issue is that organic does not mean pasture-raised or free-range in the way many people imagine. Most of these organic thighs still come from large-scale operations with high-density farming. The difference lies mainly in feed and medication protocols. In terms of texture, the thighs feel firm and heavy in hand. But once cooked, many people notice a significant amount of liquid released. This doesn't make the chicken unsafe, but it does point to rapid growth and industrial farming methods still being part of the process. The meat is tender, easy to eat, and works well for grilling, braising, or stewing. But it's not the deeply flavorful, naturally sweet chicken you get from slower-grown birds on small farms, which is what many people picture when they see the word organic. Then there's the question of sourcing. The packaging offers very little information. No farm names, no specific region, no details about transport distance. Shoppers know the chicken meets certification standards, but they don't know how long its journey was before reaching the shelf. For those who care about freshness and supply chains, that lack of transparency makes what seems like a safe choice feel uncertain. Another factor is inconsistency. Some weeks, organic chicken thighs are fully stocked. The next week, they disappear without warning. That makes it hard for many households to rely on them as a regular menu item. And when a trusted product isn't consistently available, shoppers often revert to their old choice conventional chicken that's cheaper and easier to find, even if they know it's slightly lower in quality. Kirkland Organic Chicken Thighs are appealing because they speak directly to the desire to eat cleaner and live healthier without paying an extreme premium. However, treating them as the best possible option may be a step too far. They are a reasonable choice within the big box supermarket context, not the highest benchmark for quality chicken. 3. Kirkland Bacon. Bacon tends to show up during rushed mornings, relaxed weekend brunches, or whenever you want something with a strong aroma that instantly makes a meal feel more exciting. And because it's often seen as a fun, extra, Kirkland bacon is easy to use without many people stopping to ask deeper questions about what's behind each slice. What keeps many shoppers loyal to Kirkland bacon is how it performs when cooked. The slices are thick, they don't shrink as much, the smoky aroma is pronounced, and once fried, they simply look more satisfying than thin, cheaper bacon. At a per-pound price, it feels like a smart choice, tasty, generous, and not overpriced. But precisely because everything feels solid, many people stop at that initial satisfaction and skip the closer inspection. The first overlooked issue is salt and preservatives. Kirkland bacon doesn't widely offer a nitrate-free option. That means it's cured and preserved using standard industrial methods, heavy salting, to preserve the meat and additives to maintain color and flavor. One meal doesn't make a noticeable difference, but when bacon becomes a recurring item throughout the week, the cumulative sodium intake can climb far beyond what most people realize. Next is the actual fat ratio. Thick slices don't automatically mean more lean meat. When cooked, the amount of fat rendered often surprises people, especially those who think of bacon as just a side protein. That fat is what delivers the flavor everyone loves, but it's also the reason bacon shouldn't be treated as a regular protein source. The taste makes it easy to forget that this is a food with a very high concentration of saturated fat. Another point that's rarely discussed is pork sourcing. The packaging provides almost no information about farms' raising practices or feed. Shoppers are placing their trust entirely in the brand, not in transparent data. For those who care about quality at the source, this lack of information is a significant gap, but one that's easily ignored because the product simply tastes good. On top of that, Kirkland bacon is sold in large packs, which quietly increases how often it's eaten. Once a pack is opened, the entire week starts revolving around bacon: breakfast sandwiches, salads, and pasta. What starts as a treat slowly turns into a habit, and that shift happens without most people ever consciously deciding it should. 2. Kirkland Organic Ground Turkey. Many people add Kirkland Organic Ground Turkey to their shopping list, not because it's especially appealing, but because it feels like the right choice. After a few meals of beef bacon or processed foods, the mind naturally looks for something that sounds lighter, less fat, more protein, and an organic label. And just like that, ground turkey enters the kitchen as a healthier decision. With high protein content, lower fat than ground beef, and no antibiotics or growth hormones under organic standards, ground turkey offers immediate reassurance. For anyone trying to manage cholesterol, weight, or simply eat lighter, it feels like a responsible option the moment it goes into the cart. Price is another advantage compared to organic ground turkey. At specialty health food stores, Kirkland's pricing is far more accessible. The issues start to show with frequent use. Ground turkey doesn't have the same structural consistency as beef. Some batches cook up dry very quickly, while others release a lot of liquid, becoming crumbly and difficult to hold together. That forces the cook to add oil sauces or heavier seasoning just to rescue the dish, quietly erasing the original benefit of choosing a lean protein. Many people choose turkey to eat healthier, only to compensate with extra fat or salt during cooking. Transparency is another concern. The organic label guarantees minimum standards for feed and veterinary practices, but it doesn't say where the birds were raised, the scale of the operation, or how far the meat traveled before reaching the store. This is still a product of a large industrial supply chain, not meat from small local farms, as many people imagine when they see the word organic. The sealed plastic tube packaging also creates distance between the product and the shopper. You can't see the meat's color before opening, and you don't really know its freshness until you get home. With a bulk purchase, that means if you end up with a batch that doesn't meet expectations, you're stuck either using it anyway or throwing it out, neither of which is a pleasant experience. Kirkland Organic Ground Turkey works best when used in the right role as a rotating protein, not a complete replacement for beef or other meats. Once you understand its limits, you'll know when it makes sense to choose it and when to pass, rather than buying it simply because it sounds healthy. 1. Prime Beef Premium Grade. A special dinner, a weekend occasion, or simply the desire to cook a proper steak after too many quick meals. When we see the word prime, we instantly associate it with the highest quality steakhouse dining, and the idea of if you're going to eat it, make it worth it. As a result, the buying decision is often made much faster than it is with other cuts of meat. Technically, prime is the highest grade in the USDA grading system. The heavy, evenly distributed marbling makes the meat more tender and more flavorful when cooked correctly. Compared to restaurant prices, the retail price at Costco can look like a bargain, the same grade of beef for only a fraction of what you'd pay when dining out. This is exactly why many shoppers believe they're getting a luxury product at a smart price. But there are things the word prime on the label doesn't tell you. First is origin and scale. Most retail prime beef comes from large industrial supply chains, not small farms or specialty raised cattle. The prime label speaks to marbling. It doesn't say anything about breed raising conditions or diet. For many people, Prime is mistaken as excellent in every way, when in reality it reflects just one aspect of quality. Another issue is size and thickness. Prime cuts are often very large and very thick, which immediately makes them feel worth the money. But that same thickness also makes them harder to cook properly. Thick cuts are difficult to cook evenly, and the higher fat and connective tissue often require extra trimming or careful technique. Many people buy Prime expecting a steakhouse-level result, but then cook it on a standard home stove or pan with inconsistent heat, leaving an expensive cut that doesn't deliver the experience it promised. One more thing to consider is that Prime isn't meant for frequent consumption. Its high saturated fat content is what creates its rich flavor, but it's also why it should be enjoyed in moderation. When Prime is purchased mainly because it feels like a good value, it's easy to slip into emotional decision-making instead of choosing what truly fits the meal and the body's needs. It's also important to manage expectations. Prime doesn't automatically outperform lower grades if the cook lacks skill or proper preparation. In many cases, a fresh, well-selected choice steak cooked correctly can provide a better experience than a Prime cut that's handled poorly. In the end, what causes people to overspend isn't the price tag. It's expectations and habits. Premium meat, organic labels, and attractive packaging all have real value, but only when used for the right purpose. Buying based on the feeling of this should be worth it often leads to mismatched choices, improper cooking, and unnecessary repetition. Once you understand why you're buying out of convenience, habit, or genuine fit, each decision at the meat counter becomes clearer, less wasteful, and better aligned with both your meal and your health. Which type of meat in the video surprised you the most? You walk into Costco's meat department thinking it's a savings paradise, but pick the wrong package, and your bill can jump by hundreds of dollars while the meal still disappoints. Not every cut of meat at Costco is worth the money, and some of the most eye-catching options are classic spending traps. You'd be awesome if you liked this video. Top meats that are truly worth buying. 1. USDA Prime Beef. If you really want to shop like a pro at Costco, forget those neatly trimmed, good-looking pre-cut steak trays. What's actually worth stopping your cart for are the large, whole cuts of beef sealed tightly in thick vacuum packaging, what experienced shoppers call subprimal cuts. USDA Prime isn't just a fancy label. It's the highest grade of beef, making up only about 2 to 3% of total U.S. beef production, known for its heavy, evenly distributed marbling. That fat is what makes the meat tender, flavorful, and juicy when cooked. Many people freeze when they see a price tag of several $100s on a single piece of meat. But that's sticker shock, not a value problem. Once you bring it home, 20 to 30 minutes with a sharp knife can turn that slab into a dozen thick, restaurant-quality steaks. Vacuum seal them, freeze them, and you've got premium beef ready to use over several weeks. Compared to buying pre-cut steaks or eating out, the cost per meal drops dramatically, with almost no sacrifice in quality. The only trade-off is a bit of upfront effort. For anyone willing to take that step, USDA Prime subprimal beef is easily the biggest win in Costco's entire meat section. 2. Kirkland boneless chicken breasts/thighs. If everyday life doesn't leave you much time for food prep, Kirkland's vacuum-sealed, pre-portioned boneless chicken breasts or thighs are one of the most underrated values at Costco. Unlike oversized chicken trays that require processing at home, these Kirkland packs are divided into multiple individual pouches, usually around 6 sections. Each portion is sized perfectly for a family meal or a few meal prep servings, so you don't have to thaw an entire bulk package and rush to use it. Just take one pouch, and the rest stays sealed, clean, and safely stored. This individual vacuum packaging delivers 2 major benefits. First is freshness. The meat holds its color and smell better in the fridge, and is far less likely to suffer freezer burn when frozen. Second is control. You cook exactly what you need, avoiding leftovers that go to waste, a common problem with large bulk chicken packs. While there's a small convenience premium compared to buying one massive tray, the per-pound price of Kirkland chicken is still noticeably lower than buying smaller individual packages at regular grocery stores. 3. Pork tenderloin. Take your eyes off the massive slabs of beef in the cooler for a moment and look down to the shelf nearby. You'll find long, neatly packaged pork tenderloins, one of Costco's most underrated quiet winners. One small but critical note: don't confuse pork tenderloin with pork loin, which is larger and can sometimes turn out dry. What we're talking about here is the tenderloin, the most tender cut of the pig. At Costco, tenderloins are usually sold in twin packs, but each package actually contains 2 separate tenderloins. That means a single purchase gives you 4 full tenderloins in total: bright pink, very little connective tissue, and almost no excess fat. Broken down by price, it often comes out to under $4 per pound, a level that's hard to find at regular grocery stores for the same quality. The biggest strength of pork tenderloin is versatility. You can pan-sear it for a quick 15-minute dinner, roast it whole for a weekend family meal, or slice it thin for stir-fries, sautés, or wraps. Because the meat is naturally tender, there's no need for complicated marinades or prep. A little salt, pepper, and a familiar sauce are more than enough. Thanks to its low fat content and soft texture, pork tenderloin works for almost everyone, from kids to older adults, from people watching their diet to anyone who wants a light but protein-rich meal. 4. Lamb loin chops. Many shoppers walk past Costco's lamb section, assuming it must be expensive. But if you stop and actually look at the price tags, you'll realize